there are moments in history that refuse to be buried. Whispers in the dust, etched in stone, scattered across forgotten landscapes. Stories that don't add up. Ruins that shouldn't exist. Artifacts no one can explain. How did a primitive society carve tunnels deep beneath solid rock with impossible precision? Why do entire cities vanish from every map, their names erased as if they never were? And who left behind devices so advanced they seem to belong to a future not yet lived? These are not tales of fantasy or myth. They are carved into temple walls, buried beneath centuries of silence, captured in fragments of texts, written in languages we still can't read. Each one is a puzzle missing just enough pieces to haunt us, because the truth, whatever it is, remains just out of reach. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the shadows of the past, where the lines between history, mystery, and the impossible begin to blur. Welcome to history's unsolved mysteries. Just beyond the bustling crowds of modern Athens, beneath layers of time and stone, lies the faint echo of a place once considered the very center of the ancient world. Today, little remains above ground. A few weathered blocks, a half-buried inscription. Most who pass by would never guess they stand above what was once one of the most sacred sites in all of classical Greece, the altar of the 12 gods. Set deep within the Athenian agora, the public heart of the ancient city. This altar was more than a religious monument. It was a boundary marker, a refuge, and in many ways a symbol of order in a world ruled by both politics and the divine. Constructed around 522 BC, likely by Pisistratus the Younger, grandson of the famed tyrant of Athens, the altar was dedicated to the 12 Olympian deities. But why these 12? And why here? According to ancient accounts, this was the point from which all distances in the Athenian world were measured. It was mile zero, a spiritual and civic axis around which the life of the polis revolved. Citizens gathered here to plead for justice. Supplicants sought asylum under its protection. Rituals, both public and secretive, were held here beneath the open sky. It was in every sense sacred ground. Yet today its exact location remains uncertain. For decades, archaeologists believed they had found it, partially unearthed in the 1890s, then again during work on the Athens-Piraeus Railway, but much of it was never fully excavated. Construction projects halted the work, and modern infrastructure now sits atop what might still be buried. What remains visible is only a fragment, an L-shaped wall with an ancient inscription confirming its connection to the altar. But is it truly the heart of the site or merely a peripheral piece of something grander now lost? The mystery deepens with the altar's curiously ambiguous design. Despite its prominence in Athenian life, we have no clear visual depictions of it, no surviving plans, no detailed descriptions. Was it a simple stone platform as some believe? Or did it once support a grander structure adorned with reliefs or statues of the Olympians themselves? And why is it that unlike other prominent temples and sanctuaries of the time, the altar of the 12 gods seems to have left behind so little? Some scholars argue that this absence is by design, that the altar's power lay in its simplicity, in its openness, in its direct connection to the divine. Others point to the political climate of the time. Pisistratus and his lineage were consolidating power. Could the altar have been a symbolic gesture, an attempt to unite the people under the shared reverence of the gods while reinforcing the authority of the ruling family? Still, other theories drift into more speculative waters. 12 gods, 12 Olympians. But the list of the 12 was not fixed. It varied from region to region, even within Athens itself. So which 12 were honored here? Was it Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, and the traditional pantheon? Or did this altar honor a more esoteric arrangement, perhaps reflecting older, now forgotten cults or deities who fell out of favor? And then there is the question of geometry. Some have noticed unusual patterns in the altar's orientation and possible dimensions. While no definitive layout has survived, Fragments suggest alignments that some researchers claim point to celestial events, equinoxes, solstices, or star risings. Could the altar have functioned not only as a place of worship, but as a kind of chondrical device, a cosmic marker in the urban landscape? A few fringe theorists have gone further still, suggesting the altar's position was no accident, that it occupied a node of turic energy or lay upon a sacred ley line connecting other ancient sites. These ideas remain on the fringe of academic thought, yet they persist, fueled by the lack of definitive answers and the sheer aura of mystery the altar continues to exude. Whatever the truth, the altar of the 12 gods remains one of Athens' most elusive landmarks mentioned in texts by Thucydides, Aristophanes and Pausanias. It stood at the heart of the city, woven into the lives of its citizens. And yet, in the modern world, it exists more as an absence than a presence, a ghost embedded in the stone, overshadowed by rails and roadways. Today, standing near the site, it is difficult to feel its former gravity. But if you listen carefully, there is something in the air, a silence that feels intentional, like the pause before a revelation. You begin to wonder, what if more lies beneath? What if this altar, so central to Athenian identity, was never just about the gods, but about the secrets they were meant to guard? And perhaps that is the altar's final lesson, that in the shadows of even the most visible places, something essential can still remain hidden. So we move on deeper into the layers of forgotten history, always wondering what else may be buried just beneath our feet. From the ruined altar stones of ancient Athens, we journey north across centuries and empires to the mist-veiled forests and cold stone monasteries of early medieval Europe. Here, nestled in the gentle hills of what is now southwestern Germany, stood the imperial abbey of Lorch, once a beacon of knowledge and faith in the Carolinian world. Today, only fragments remain, a triumphal arch, a silent crypt, and scattered stones worn down by time. But within its vanished scriptorum nearly 1,200 years ago, something extraordinary was created. A manuscript shrouded in mystery and unlike anything else of its era. It is known as the Codex of Lorch, or more precisely, the Langobardic Codex of Lorch. Bound in soft parchment, inked by hand, and fragmented across time, this codex is no ordinary religious manuscript. It is a cryptic mosaic of languages, symbols and artistic flourishes at once unmistakably Christian, and yet filled with visual and textual anomalies that resist clear interpretation. What makes the codex so intriguing is not just its age, but its origin. Though discovered in the abbey that bore Charlemagne's patronage, the codex appears to predate the Carolian Renaissance. Paleographic studies suggest it may have been written in the late 8th or early 9th century, but perhaps not in law at all. Some clues hint at origins further south in the twilight of the Langobardic kingdom before it fell to the Franks. But who wrote it? And more importantly, why? At first glance, the codex appears to be a liturgical text, psalms, gospels, prayers. But a closer look reveals strange insertions. Latin phrases blend awkwardly with older Germanic runes. Marginalia show notations in a script that doesn't correspond to any known medieval hand. Intricate illustrations of saints sit beside abstract geometrical patterns, spirals, and what some claim are astrological glyphs. A passage that should recount the Gospel of Luke instead lapses into a fragmented genealogy that leads nowhere. Was this an early attempt to preserve fading oral traditions? Or perhaps a scribe's personal experiment caught between worlds as Latin supplanted the vernacular? More puzzling still are the sections scholars simply can't translate. A few pages appear to follow no grammatical structure. Some speculate these are ciphers, cryptid messages concealed in the guise of holy text. Others propose they may be glossalia preserved from ecstatic ritual speech. In one particularly perplexing folio, a passage resembles no known language, but follows a rhythm and repetition pattern that suggests deliberate design. Is it a code, a chant, or something else entirely? Historians have debated these inconsistencies for decades with no consensus. Some believe the manuscript is a palimpsest, not just physically, but culturally, a layering of belief systems from the pagan traditions of the Langobards to the rising tide of Latin Christianity. But the Langobards, after all, were late to convert, and when they did, their Christianity retained echoes of earlier rites: ritual kingship, sacred groves, the veneration of ancestral spirits. Could the Codex preserve traces of these older beliefs veiled beneath the language of scripture? The illustrations too raise questions. In one folio, a radiant cross appears suspended over a tree. Not the traditional tree of life, but something more primal, more abstract. Below it, 12 figures are arranged in a circle, none labeled, none identical. Some have interpreted this as an early cosmological map. Others see a symbolic calendar, perhaps tied to lunar cycles. And yet others argue it's simply devotional art misunderstood through modern eyes. But even mainstream interpretations cannot explain the Codex's fragmented fate. Today, the Codex of Lorsch does not exist in a single volume. Its pages are scattered across libraries and museums in Vienna, in Vatican City, in Bathianium, in Romania, and in parts of Germany. Some were deliberately removed in the 15th century, others misplaced during the chaos of war. A few have vanished without trace. Why was it dismantled? Was it considered heretical or simply obsolete? Some suggest that certain folios contain teachings or symbols that later church authorities found troubling. Others believe it was divided for preservation, though curiously no official record explains when or how. One section found in Austria contains marginal notes in an unfamiliar hand, written centuries after the main text. They reference the knowledge hidden in the old tongue and speak cryptically of doors between worlds, a phrase found nowhere else in Christian manuscripts of the time. Most scholars dismiss this as poetic metaphor, a late medieval flourish, but it has given rise to more speculative theories. Could the Codex have contained more than just scripture? Some fringe researchers argue it may have functioned as a spiritual map, a guide not to places, but to states of being, a tool for meditation, or even initiation. They point to recurring references to silence, stillness, and light not of the sun, ideas that echo early monastic mysticism or perhaps something even older. The truth, if it exists, lies in the fragments, in the missing pages, the erratic marginalia, the codes no one has yet cracked. Today, scholars continue to digitize and analyze its parts. Artificial intelligence has been applied to the cryptic passages with limited success. But with every clue comes a deeper sense of how little we know, not just about the manuscript, but about the culture that created it. A culture suspended between collapse and rebirth, faith and memory, scripture and secret. And so the Langobardic Codex of Lorsch remains, half open, half hidden, a book that speaks in half voices through half pages across half-forgotten time. Was it the last breath of a vanishing people? A sacred artifact meant to preserve more than prayers? Or is it just what it appears to be, an ancient, broken book whose mysteries lie more in our yearning to understand it than in the pages themselves? We turn the leaf and move forward into the next enigma. From the fragmented whispers of a medieval manuscript, we cross oceans and centuries, arriving in the lush, rain-soaked lowlands of southern Costa Rica. Here, between tangled jungle and the slow, winding rivers of the Deis Delta, lies some of the most enigmatic artifacts in the Americas. Perfectly shaped, impossibly heavy and silent as stone, they are known as the Deis spheres, or more simply, the stone spheres of Costa Rica. Scattered across the landscape, embedded in fields, tucked into gardens, and occasionally still buried beneath the earth. These massive orbs range in size from just a few centimeters to over 2 meters in diameter. Some weigh several tons, and yet many of them are astonishingly symmetrical, carved from solid granodiorite or gabbro materials found in nearby foothills, but shaped with a precision that defies the tools available at the time. Over 300 have been found since the 1930s, when banana plantation workers first unearthed them while clearing jungle for the United Fruit Company. Machines were brought in, the land was stripped, and the spheres, strange and weathered, began to surface from the soil as though patiently waiting to be rediscovered. But who carved them, and why? These questions remain as murky today as they were nearly a century ago. Most archaeologists attribute the spheres to the now extinct Dis culture which thrived in the region from around AD 700 to 1530. Evidence suggests they were created during the later period of this civilization, perhaps between AD 1 and 500, and yet the spheres do not accompany temples, tombs, or roads. They are not clearly tied to ceremonial sites. They seem to have been arranged purposefully, often in lines, triangles, or clusters, but the meaning of these patterns has vanished with time. Some were found near ancient mounds or settlements, suggesting they may have served a symbolic or territorial function. Others appear to have been aligned astronomically, their placement possibly marking solstices or constellations. But no written records, no oral traditions, and no living descendants remain to explain their true role. How were they made? That question too is still debated. The Deyes had no metal tools, and yet the surfaces of the larger spheres are remarkably smooth, even after centuries exposed to the elements. Some theorize that the stones were roughly shaped with hammer stones, then polished using sand, water, and friction over many years. Others wonder if heat and controlled firecracking played a role. But perhaps the most difficult aspect is not their carving, but their transportation. Several of the largest spheres were found far from any known quarry. Moving a 10-tonnen stone through dense forest without the wheel or draft animals would have been a monumental task. Was it done with wooden rollers, sleds, and manpower? Or did the builders use methods we have not yet imagined? More curious still is how many of the spheres were moved again centuries later. During the early colonial period, some spheres were deliberately relocated. Others were disturbed by looters or repurposed as symbols of power by local elites. Even in the 20th century, many were moved from their original locations. Today, several sit outside government buildings or decorate plazas and museums. Their context has been lost, perhaps forever, and so in the absence of answers, speculation has filled the void. In the 1970s, fringe theorists began to propose alternative explanations that the spheres were navigational beacons for lost seafarers, markers of ley lines or energy fields, or even remnants of Atlantis. Some claimed the spheres emitted subtle vibrations. Others connected them to extraterrestrial visitors. These ideas, while lacking evidence, reflect the enduring sense of mystery the spheres inspire. But even mainstream scholars are left with profound uncertainties. Why spheres? Why not statues or stelae or altars? Were these objects meant to be seen or touched? Did they represent the sun, the cosmos, or something more abstract: perfection, power, eternity? Some researchers have noted that in several indigenous belief systems across the Americas, the circle holds deep symbolic meaning, a representation of the cycle of life, the sun, the heavens. Could the spheres have played a role in ritual movement? Were they placed in patterns that mirrored celestial paths, inviting participants to walk among the gods? And what of the ones still buried? Ground-penetrating radar has revealed several spheres yet to be excavated, some perhaps larger than any yet recovered. Could these untouched orbs hold further clues, inscriptions, inlays, or are they just as silent as the rest, content to remain mysteries beneath the soil? Today, the Deyes spheres are recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the few prehistoric artifacts in the Americas given such status. But recognition does not always bring understanding. The culture that made them left no maps, no myths, no legends that survived colonization. In many ways, the spheres are all that's left, a quiet echo of a people whose voices were erased. And so they sit in fields, in forests, in places where time moves slowly and memory runs deep, massive unmoving, and yet impossibly full of questions. Were they guardians, offerings, tools of forgotten science, or simply symbols of power in a vanished world? We may never know, but sometimes mystery itself is the message. And with that, we move onward into the next forgotten chapter of the human story. From the rain-drenched deltas of Costa Rica, we cross the Atlantic and drift into the golden heat of North Africa, where the Mediterranean wind whispers across olive groves and the cracked remains of ancient cities. In the hills of northern Tunisia, near the ruins of Douga and the remnants of Punic strongholds, there lies a carved stone slab half buried in silence and shadow. It is known as the Hagia Sophora inscription, a name as elusive as the meaning behind the stone itself. Roughly a meter wide, weathered by centuries of sun and sand, the stone is marked with a sequence of lines etched in a script that has never been fully deciphered. It was discovered by chance in the 1920s near a hillside site known locally as Hagia Sophora, a place with no major settlement, no known temple, and no obvious historical significance. And yet the inscription has baffled scholars for decades. At first glance, the writing appears Punic, descended from the Phoenician script used across Carthage and its territories, but something is off. The characters twist and narrow in unusual ways. Some appear inverted, others resemble symbols not found in any known Semitic language, and interspersed among the glyphs are strange pictographs, figures of animals, abstract spirals, and what may be stylized constellations. What does it say? Who left it here and why? Initial theories proposed it was a boundary stone, perhaps marking the limits of a lost Punic settlement or sacred space. But the language does not match any regional dialect, and there are no references to land ownership or geographic markers typical of boundary inscriptions. Others suggested it was a rarity, perhaps a grave marker for a forgotten noble or priest. Yet there is no tomb, no accompanying burial, no human remains. Instead, the stone stands alone, unconnected, and deeply out of place. Linguists have attempted to parse its lines, comparing the script to Punic, Berber, Tifinagh, early Libyco-Berber texts, and even South Arabian inscriptions. None offer a perfect match. Certain characters seem to align with pre-Roman Libyan scripts, but only partially. Some scholars argue the writing could be a form of pseudo-crypt, a symbolic, non-linguistic system used for ritual or decorative purposes. But if so, it's the only one of its kind in the region. Adding to the enigma is the name itself, Hagia Sophora. It does not appear in any ancient text. The phrase is believed to derive from local oral tradition passed down through generations of villagers. Some say Ha was a guardian spirit or ancient name of the land. Others believe Sofa refers to the flowering tree that once covered the hills, now largely vanished, but no definitive origin has been confirmed. And curiously, the phrase Hagia Sophora does not appear on the stone itself. It is a modern label attached long after its discovery. Archaeologically, the surrounding site reveals little. Shards of pottery suggest some form of habitation, but there are no foundations, no roads, no indication of sustained occupation. It is as though the inscription was brought here, placed deliberately away from prying eyes. Why? One of the more provocative theories suggests that the stone may represent a syncretic tradition, a fusion of Punic, Libyan, and even pre-Punic belief systems. Tunisia, after all, was a cultural crossroads. Long before the rise of Carthage, the region was home to Neolithic and Berber tribes whose oral traditions and cosmologies have all but disappeared. Could the inscription preserve traces of a forgotten mythology, a symbolic language meant only for initiates? Another hypothesis focuses on astronomy. In 1993, a team of independent researchers proposed that the symbols carved alongside the text resembled known constellations visible over North Africa in the first millennium BC. Using computer models, they mapped the positions of certain stars during the spring equinox, finding tentative correlations with the carved figures. One spiral, they noted, echoed the rotation of the Milky Way. A bird-shaped glyph placed above it aligned roughly with the ancient position of Cygnus. Could the Hagia Sophia inscription be a kind of stellar map, a tool for ritual navigation, or even a calendar encoded in stone? Mainstream archaeologists have responded with caution. Correlation does not imply meaning, and yet the stone remains untouched by conventional explanation. No translation has emerged. No twin inscription has been found elsewhere. It is a solitary voice from a time we can no longer hear. Fringe theories predictably have taken root. Some propose the inscription is proof of early trans-Mediterranean contact, perhaps involving Phoenician navigators or even lost civilizations. With advanced symbolic systems, others point to the abstract symbols as evidence of proto-language, some early pre-alphabetic form of communication used in esoteric rituals or mystery cults. These theories lack direct evidence, but their persistence reveals something deeper: the power of the unknown. The Hagia Sophia inscription stands as a reminder of how much we have forgotten. It is easy to see history as a chain of known events, a progression from one empire to the next. But then something like this appears, a carved stone with no context, no origin, no echo, and it challenges that neat narrative. It suggests there were moments, voices, and meanings we never recorded and perhaps were never meant to. As the wind moves through the grasses of northern Tunisia, brushing against the stone that has stood for centuries untranslatable, one is left to wonder, was this a message, a warning, a prayer, or something far older and far more elusive, a trace of a world whose language we have lost forever? We leave the wind-swept hill behind and press forward into the next unsolved mystery that history has refused to let go. From the sun-to-sked stones of Tunisia, we travel west across ocean and jungle to the dense, humid heart of the Chiapas highlands in southern Mexico. Here, beneath a canopy of green and shadow, the ancient city of Palenque rises like a dream from the forest floor. Moss-covered temples, fractured stairways, and time-worn glyphs whisper of a civilization that once measured time in cycles of eternity and traced its gods across the stars. And at the center of this lost city, buried deep within the Temple of the Inscriptions, lies a tomb unlike any other in Mesoamerica, a crypt that has fascinated, puzzled, and divided scholars since the day it was first breached. It is the tomb of Pal the Great. Kahinich Janab. Pal, ruler of Palenque for nearly 7 decades, was a king whose life was recorded in stone with extraordinary detail. Born in AD 603, he assumed the throne at just 12 years old and led his city to a golden age of art, architecture, and celestial science. But it is not his reign that most captures modern attention. It is what was found beneath the temple built in his name. In 1952, after years of excavation, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruiz uncovered a hidden staircase beneath the temple's floor. The air was thick with limestone dust and stagnant silence as the steps descended deeper than any Maya tomb previously known. At the end of the passage, sealed behind a massive stone slab, was the burial chamber of Pal, a cavernous crypt where the walls were etched with glyphs, and the sarcophagus lay at the chamber's center, covered with one of the most mysterious carvings in the ancient world. A single massive slab of carved limestone, measuring over 12 ft long, depicted Pal not in repose, but in motion, seemingly suspended in space. His body reclines at an angle, surrounded by intricate patterns. A cross-shaped world tree, serpents, celestial bands, glyphs of rebirth and sacrifice. Beneath him, a strange vessel or structure appears to support, or perhaps consume him. What is this image trying to say? Mainstream archaeologists interpret the scene through the lens of Maya cosmology. They see Pakal descending into Xibalba, the Maya underworld, surrounded by symbols of death and rebirth. The world tree represents the axis of the universe linking the underworld, the earthly realm, and the heavens. The entire composition, they argue, is a metaphorical map of cosmic transformation, depicting the king's death as part of a divine cycle, not an end, but a return. But not everyone agrees. In the decades following its discovery, the tomb, especially the sarcophagus lid, became fertile ground for more speculative theories. In the 1960s, the Swiss author Erich von Daniken famously proposed that the lid depicts Pal not descending into the underworld, but piloting a spacecraft. To him, the posture of the body, the tubes, the flames, and mechanical-looking elements were not symbolic, but literal evidence, he claimed, of contact with ancient astronauts. Though widely dismissed by archaeologists, this interpretation gained popular traction and cemented the image of Pal's tomb in the modern imagination as something far stranger than history was ready to accept. And even within academic circles, questions remain. Why was Pal buried in such a monumental fashion so different from other Maya kings? Most royal tombs were modest, often hidden or looted. This one was neither. It was vast, deeply buried, and sealed with intent. The 9 stucco figures lining the chamber walls are believed to represent the lords of the underworld, but their expressions, postures, and arrangement remain enigmatic. Were they guardians, witnesses, or something more symbolic? And what of Pakal himself? His skeletal remains show a man in his 40s, yet he ruled until the age of 80. Was the body truly his? Some have speculated that either the age estimate is wrong or that this is not the original occupant. Yet the jade death mask, the carved shell jewelry, and the inscriptions around the tomb all point with precision to Pakal's identity. Adding to the mystery is the fact that the staircase leading to the tomb had been filled with rubble and carefully sealed. It was clearly not meant to be opened again. Why then did the Maya go to such lengths to build and then conceal a structure of such spiritual significance? Outside, the Temple of the Inscriptions continues to watch over the jungle, its hieroglyphs etched with dates that extend far beyond Pal's life, tracing cosmic events thousands of years in both directions. These dates raise yet another question. Were the Maya recording history or predicting it? Perhaps the true message of Pal's tomb is not one of interstellar travel, but of interwoven time, a vision of kingship and cosmos, of life and afterlife, bound so tightly that the lines blur. And yet, one detail lingers, often overlooked. At the very base of the sarcophagus, directly below Paul's feet, is a carving of a small cross-like figure. Some say it represents the god of the underworld.
Others see it as a soul in flight. A few even suggest it is the seed of the world tree itself beginning to grow.
But whatever it is, it's rising. Was Pakal a man who reached beyond death? A ruler prepared for cosmic rebirth?
Or simply a king buried with the full weight of symbolism his people could bestow?
The jungle continues to press inward. Roots climb the temple walls. Rain gathers on Muscoved stones. And far below, in the quiet dark, the king still lies beneath the stars carved in stone, waiting. We now turn to another enigma, another page in history's unfinished manuscript. From the jungle-cloaked tombs of Mesoamerica, we return eastward across deserts and ruins to the cradle of civilization. Here, beneath the vast skies of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers once fed empires of clay and fire,
a legend rises from the dust, a structure of ambition and defiance.
A monument of pride and perhaps punishment. It is one of the oldest mysteries still echoing in the annals of human memory. The Tower of Babel. Today, its story survives largely through myth, etched into the pages of Genesis, whispered in Quranic verses, echoed in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions. A tower built to pierce the heavens, a united humanity scattered by divine will, and a name, Babel, forever linked to the birth of language, division, and confusion. But was there ever a tower? Was it merely allegory? Or could there be something real, still buried beneath the shifting soils of Iraq? The search for the Tower of Babel begins not with legend, but with archaeology. Near the city of Har, not far from Baghdad, lie the
ruins of Babylon, one of the most iconic cities of the ancient world.
For centuries, it was the jewel of Mesopotamia, a center of art, astronomy, politics, and power. And at its heart stood a massive structure known in Ardean as a Tamani, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth, a towering ziggurat 7 stages high, dedicated to the god Marduk. Many scholars believe a Tamani is the historical candidate for the Tower of Babel. Descriptions from ancient sources speak of its enormous scale. According to a late Babylonian tablet, the ziggurat stood over 90 meters high, nearly the height of a modern skyscraper. Greek historians like Herodotus and later writers such as Strabo and Ctesias described its vast dimensions, its ceremonial staircases, and its connection to the heavens above. Even Alexander the Great, upon arriving in Babylon in the 4th century BC, is said to have ordered its restoration, though he died before the work was completed. But today it is gone. Little remains but a flattened, eroded mound, often overlooked by travelers and nearly erased by time, warfare, and neglect. The bricks have long since been quarried for other buildings. The ziggurat's base, once thought to be indestructible, lies shattered and submerged in a pool of groundwater. What happened to this colossal tower? Was it intentionally destroyed? Was it swallowed by centuries of conquest and decay? The biblical narrative suggests something more. According to Genesis 11, the people of the earth, once united by a single language, came together in the land of Shinar to build a tower with its top in the heavens. But God, displeased with their arrogance, confused their language and scattered them across the world. The tower was left unfinished, its story becoming a cautionary tale of pride and divine retribution. But was the confusion of tongues symbolic, or did it reflect a real historical event? Some scholars have proposed that the myth of Babel may encode memories of a societal collapse perhaps triggered by internal division, natural disaster, or the fragmentation of once centralized power. Others suggest it echoes the fall of a great city and the dispersion of peoples in the wake of conquest, events all too common in Mesopotamian history. And then there are the linguistic anomalies in Sumerian, Akkadian, Aramaic, and Hebrew, languages once spoken in and around the region. Variations of the word Babel carry different meanings. In Hebrew, Babel becomes a wordplay on Baal, meaning to confuse. But in Ardean, Babilu means gate of God. Could this duality suggest that the original name was meant not as confusion, but as connection, a gateway rather than a warning? The symbolic nature of ziggurats themselves adds another layer to the puzzle. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt, which served primarily as tombs, ziggurats were not burial sites. They were cosmic mountains, artificial peaks meant to bridge the gap between earth and sky. Each level represented a stage of the heavens. The temple at the top was thought to be the dwelling place of the gods. Could the Tower of Babel myth have preserved this ancient spiritual concept, then twisted it into a moral tale? Modern excavations at Babylon have uncovered partial inscriptions, foundations, and building plans that match ancient descriptions of Etmani. A tablet discovered in the early 20th century even contains a depiction of the tower, complete with tiered levels and a stepped form. But still, no definitive remains of the tower have been found. No complete inscription names it as Babel. No single artifact ties the legend conclusively to the ruin. This uncertainty has given rise to more speculative ideas. Some suggest that the tower lies not in Babylon but somewhere else, perhaps beneath nearby mounds yet to be excavated, or even in other ancient Mesopotamian Cities like Eridu or Nippur, where similar ziggurats once stood, a few researchers following fringe theories propose that the tower's destruction may not
Have been entirely natural.
They point to unusually vitrified bricks, possible evidence of high heat, or even an unexplained blast. Others go further, invoking lost technologies, extraterrestrial intervention, or metaphysical symbolism, suggesting that the real Babel was not a place, but a shift in consciousness, a fall from unity into fragmentation. But perhaps the most compelling mystery is this: why does this story endure? From sacred texts to Renaissance paintings, from folklore to modern science fiction, the Tower of Babel continues to haunt our imagination.
Is it because it speaks to something timeless?
The desire to reach higher than we should? The fear of being scattered and misunderstood? Or is there something deeper? Something buried beneath the sands of Iraq, waiting still to be unearthed? Beneath layers of mud brick and silence, the foundations may yet lie undisturbed. And perhaps, just perhaps, the tower is still there. We leave the land of Babel behind and turn our gaze toward the next forgotten enigma. One more riddle in the vast mosaic of history's unsolved mysteries. From the ancient plains of Babylon, where myth and architecture once reached toward the heavens, we now turn to a quieter, more intimate enigma, one tucked not in stone, but in ink on fragile papyrus. Preserved within the archives of the Museo Egipteo in Tin, Italy, lies a document so rare, so startlingly unique, that it continues to puzzle historians, linguists, and Egyptologists alike. It is known as the Tin Erotic Papyrus. Measuring over 2 1/2 ms in length, this ancient scroll, dating to around 1150 BC during Egypt's New Kingdom, unrolls into two contrasting halves. The first depicts a humorous procession of animals, monkeys playing instruments, donkeys pouring wine, and cats herding geese. Scenes that seem drawn from a surreal parody of daily life. But it is the second half that stirs deeper curiosity and perhaps even discomfort. Here in vivid detail, men and women are portrayed engaged in a variety of explicit sexual acts. The figures are not idealized gods or mythic heroes, but ordinary aging humans, some bald, some pot-bellied, painted with a surprising degree of realism and anatomical accuracy. They are accompanied by fragments of hieratic script written in a cursive form of ancient Egyptian. But much of the text remains undeciphered or ambiguous. The meaning, the purpose remains unclear. Why would a civilization known for its formality, symbolism, and strict artistic codes create such an unorthodox document? And for what audience? Unlike the solemn grandeur of temple inscriptions or the moral teachings of orary texts, the Turan erotic papyrus seems to belong to an entirely different world. One where laughter, satire, and desire are unabashedly on display. It breaks from nearly every established convention of Egyptian visual art. No other known artifact from ancient Egypt comes close in tone, theme, or graphic expression. Some scholars suggest it may have been a form of entertainment created for the amusement of a court or a high-ranking official. Others believe it was a satirical piece poking fun at societal norms or religious tabos. But satire alone cannot fully explain the depth of detail, the symbolism, or the care with which the scenes are rendered. Could it have had a ritual function, a magical one, or was it simply a private indulgence, a lost example of erotic literature in visual form? There are no clear answers. The context of its discovery
adds to the mystery. The papyrus was acquired by the
Italian explorer Bernardino Dovetti in the early 19th century amid the chaos of widespread looting and collecting during the Napoleonic expeditions. It arrived in tin, already damaged, with several sections missing and others badly worn. No precise provenance was recorded. It is believed to have originated from Deir el Medina, the village that housed the artisans who worked on the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, an enclave known for its literate and artistically skilled inhabitants. If the papyrus was created there, It may suggest that the artisans in their relative isolation produced works not just of solemn devotion, but also of private humor and personal commentary. Could the Tyrannerotic papyrus be the product of one of these artisans, a subversive voice in a society otherwise bound by hierarchy and ritual? The animals in the first half of the scroll may hold hidden clues. Scholars have proposed that these vignettes are allegorical, a subtle critique of human behavior through the inversion of natural order. Cats serve mice.
Monkeys mimic priests. Animals drink, feast, and dance like men.
Is this merely satire or something more philosophical? A meditation on chaos and the animal instincts that lie beneath the surface of civilized life? And what of the inscriptions? The partial texts that accompany the erotic scenes remain stubbornly opaque. Some appear to describe the participants with humorous or mocking phrases. Others may reference known myths or colloquial expressions lost to time. The absence of a full translation has left open the possibility that hidden layers of meaning remain just out of reach. Some researchers believe the papyrus may preserve fragments of now lost oral traditions, tales passed among workers and scribes never intended for official record. Others argue it reflects the presence of a literary genre we have yet to uncover, a kind of ancient burlesque or visual poem. And a few fringe theories suggest even stranger possibilities, that the images encode rituals of fertility or represent a kind of dream journey through the lower desires of the soul akin to the more symbolic spiritual journeys found in Egyptian religious texts. But no parallel has yet been found, no second scroll, no explanation in the surviving record. The Turin erotic papyrus stands entirely alone. For decades it was kept hidden, considered too vulgar or inappropriate for display. Even today, it remains one of the least publicly discussed artifacts in Egyptian archaeology, despite its undeniable historical value. Its uniqueness, its strangeness, and its sheer audacity continue to unsettle tidy narratives about ancient Egypt's supposed conservatism. And so the questions linger. Was this simply the private joke of a gifted scribe, a forgotten scroll meant to provoke laughter and astonishment? Or could it be a window into a side of Egyptian life rarely preserved in stone and text? The desires, irreverence, and complexity of a people far more like us than we often imagine. The papyrus remains stored in fragments, fragile and incomplete. Its figures still dance and grapple across the millennia, locked in a tableau that is at once comical, carnal, and curiously profound. Whatever its meaning, the Turin erotic papyrus reminds us that history is not always solemn and that sometimes the greatest mysteries lie not in what was said, but in what was drawn and left behind. We turn the page once more and step into the next unanswered question of our human story. From the private world of an ancient Egyptian scroll, we travel across continents and centuries to a wind-swept stretch of the Indian coastline, where myth and sea meet stone and silence. Here on the shores of the Bay of Bengal in the Indian state of Tamil Nadu stands a cluster of ancient temples carved from granite, their facades weathered by monsoon rains and salted winds. This is Mahabalipuram, known for its intricately carved rock-cut shrines and mysterious monolithic structures. Mahabalipuram is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a legacy of the Pallava dynasty that ruled southern India between the 6th and 9th centuries A. But amid the temples that still rise from the land, there lingers a much older legend.
One that speaks of something greater.
Something now hidden beneath the waves. It is the tale of the 7 pagodas. For generations, sailors along India's southeastern coast spoke of them. 7 magnificent temples, their golden spires said to shimmer in the sunlight, rising side by side at the edge of the sea. Only one remains above water today, the shore temple, its pyramidal towers watching endlessly over the waves. The others, the story goes, were swallowed by the ocean. But is this just a myth? Or could the sea truly be hiding something far more ancient beneath its surface? The first clues come not from folklore, but from stone. The surviving shore temple, dating to the early 8th century, is striking not only for its form, but for its vulnerability. It stands perilously close to the sea on a rocky promontory that's repeatedly battered by wind and salt spray. Its foundation reveals centuries of erosion, and yet it endures. Surrounding it are scattered remnants of other structures, half-buried shrines, collapsed halls, and broken sculptures of lions and deities, all carved from the same grey granite. Why would the Pallavas, master builders and engineers, construct temples so close to the unforgiving ocean? Some scholars believe Mahabalipuram once stood further inland and that the sea has gradually encroached over centuries. Others point to the possibility of tectonic activity or sudden floods, suggesting that a dramatic environmental event may have altered the coastline in a single stroke. Could such an event have submerged 6 other temples, leaving only one behind? British and European travelers in the colonial era reported hearing locals speak of the submerged temples. In the late 18th century, British sailor accounts described the gleam of submerged spires seen at low tide as if something larger once lay just beneath the waterline. But without modern technology, the legends remained little more than poetic echoes. Then in December 2004, nature revealed a secret. A powerful tsunami struck the coast of India, exposing areas of the seabed that had not been visible for centuries. As the waters briefly receded, stunned onlookers watched as ancient stone walls, carved blocks, and what appeared to be the remains of man-made structures emerged from the sands offshore. Archaeologists rushed to the site. In the months that followed, teams from the Indian Navy and the Archaeological Survey of India conducted sonar scans and underwater dives. What they found surprised even seasoned researchers. Just offshore, beneath a thin layer of sediment and coral, lay clear evidence of structures shaped by human hands. Large rectangular stone blocks arranged in patterns, foundation-like alignments, and carvings eerily similar to those found on shore. Some stones bore motifs seen in other Pallava-era temples, lotuses, lions, and elephants frozen in time beneath the sea. Was this the long-lost complex of the 7 pagodas? Cautiously, experts have confirmed the presence of submerged ruins, but whether they belong to 6 other temples or to something else entirely remains unknown. The dating is still debated. Some fragments appear to match the known 8th century structures, but others may predate them, hinting at earlier phases of construction or earlier civilizations entirely. And still the stories persist. Tamil legends speak of Mahabalipuram not merely as a temple site, but as a city built by gods. One tale describes a divine architect, Vishnukarma, creating a city so beautiful that the gods grew envious and summoned the sea to drown it. Others speak of King Bali, a mythic figure whose acts of devotion earned him the right to build sacred cities beneath the ocean. Are these allegories or distant memories of real disasters passed down as myth? There are those who wonder if Mahabalipuram is only a small part of a larger forgotten narrative, a piece of a vanished coastal civilization now lying silent beneath the shifting seafloor. Speculative theories have connected the 7 pagodas to lost continents like Lemura or Kumari Kandam, the mythical sunken landmass said by some to have once stretched across the Indian Ocean. These ideas remain outside the bounds of mainstream archaeology, and yet they reflect a deeper truth that the Indian coast holds secrets we have only begun to uncover. Today, with rising seas and shifting sands, the submerged ruins near Mahabalipuram are more vulnerable than ever. Conservation efforts continue, but exploration is limited. Currents are strong, visibility low. Many areas remain unmapped. We are left with fragments of stone of story of memory, so what truly lies beneath the waves? Were there 6 more temples, their spires long erased by salt and time? Or was the legend of the 7 pagodas always symbolic, a metaphor for spiritual transcendence, with 6 lost in the material world and only 1 surviving as a gateway to the divine? The wind howls against the shore temple as it has for centuries, and the tide rises again. And as the sea reclaims the shoreline, we're left with a single haunting question. How much of the past has already been washed away? Our journey continues deeper still into the forgotten corners of our collective memory. As the waves retreat from the sunken shores of Mahabalipuram, we journey far north into colder air, quieter lands, and an altogether different kind of mystery. Beneath the long shadows of the Arctic Circle, among the wind-swept tundras and ancient forests of Scandinavia, lives a people whose traditions trace back thousands of years. They are the Sami, Europe's only indigenous population, whose ancestral lands stretch across modern-day Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia. For centuries, the Sami practiced a nomadic lifestyle, moving with the reindeer herds, harmonizing with nature, and preserving spiritual customs that few outsiders understood. At the heart of their religious practice stood an object both sacred and strange. The Guavdis, the Sami shamanic drum, oval in shape, stretched with reindeer hide, and framed by birch or pine. Each drum was more than a musical instrument. It was a map, a calendar, a memory, and perhaps a code. But not all drums were alike, and this is where the mystery begins. Some Sami drums were covered with intricate symbols, small figures painted in red or black pigment. There might be dozens on a single drum head. Suns and moons, reindeer and fish, human figures, stars, crosses, and abstract shapes arranged in carefully spaced clusters. No two drums were identical. Each one was personal, handmade, and to this day, only partially understood. Were these symbols simply decorative, or did they form a symbolic language, a visual system through which the unseen world could be understood? In Sami tradition, the drums were used in rituals led by the Noidi, or shaman. With the rhythmic beat of a carved drumstick and the motion of a small metal pointer,
Often made of brass or bone, the Noidi would enter a trance,
asking questions, seeking guidance, or traveling spiritually across different realms. The pointer, called an arpa, would move across the drum surface as it was struck, landing on symbols that were then interpreted. Some viewed the process as divination. Others saw it as a form of communication with ancestors, spirits, or the natural forces that govern the land. But if the symbols were used to answer questions, how were the answers formed? This is where the mystery of the Sami drum codes deepens. Of the hundreds of known drums once used across Sapmi, the traditional Sami territory, only around 70 have survived. Many were confiscated during centuries of Christianization, when Sami practices were condemned as pagan or even satanic. Drums were burned, hidden, or taken by missionaries and state authorities, some eventually ending up in European museums, but those that remain continue to puzzle researchers. Attempts to translate the drum symbols have proven elusive. Some appear to be straightforward, representing sun gods, weather, animals, or hunting scenes, but others are more abstract, spirals, grids, multi-armed figures, and geometric patterns whose meanings have not been passed down. Were these symbols part of a visual language, a code passed between generations? Of Noid? Some researchers believe so. They argue that the spatial arrangement of symbols on certain drums reflects a kind of cosmological map. The upper part may represent the celestial realm, the middle, the human world, and the lower portion, the underworld. Others propose that the drum surface acts like a circular narrative,
read not linearly but relationally with meaning,
arising from combinations
and sequences rather than individual signs, and yet these
interpretations remain speculative. Unlike other ancient symbolic systems such as Egyptian hieroglyphs or Sumerian cuneiform, Sami drum symbols were not standardized. They varied from region to region, even family to family. Their meanings were never written down. Instead, knowledge was passed orally from Noi to apprentice. Knowledge now largely lost due to centuries of suppression. In the absence of firm answers, more speculative theories have emerged. Some suggest the drums contain embedded astronomical knowledge that the placement of stars and lunar cycles encoded seasonal changes essential for survival in the Arctic. Others go further, proposing that the symbols mirror shamanic journey maps, representations of altered states of consciousness or spirit worlds not meant for literal interpretation, but experiential navigation. Still others claim that the drums, when viewed collectively, form a proto-writing system, an early step towards symbolic language, perhaps even predating the runes used by neighboring Norse cultures. Few fringe theorists have drawn parallels between Sami drums and other ancient trans-based tools from Tibetan, thanks to Mesoamerican Cotis arguing that humanity may share an archetypal visual vocabulary rooted in altered states of awareness, but these ideas remain controversial. One drum in particular, now held in the British Museum, has become a focal point of the mystery. Its surface is crowded with dozens of small symbols, including what appears to be a church, human figures holding staffs, a central sun figure, and rows of animals. Some believe it reflects a merging of Siam cosmology with Christian influence, a hybrid map of old and new. Others argue it records a historical event, perhaps even a response to colonization. But with no living interpreters of its symbols, the meaning remains locked within the skin. And so we are left with questions. Were these drums individual tools of meditation or collective repositories of sacred knowledge? Were they designed to predict the weather, the success of a hunt, the will of the spirits? Or did they encode deeper metaphysical truths, understandings of time, space, and life beyond the physical? Today, a revival is underway. Young Sami artists and spiritual leaders are reclaiming these symbols, reconnecting with ancestral traditions long silenced. Yet even they admit some meanings may never be recovered. What was once sacred has become a cipher, a code without a key. And perhaps that's what gives the Sami drums their haunting power. In a world obsessed with clarity and translation, they offer something different. A message that resists easy answers. A reminder that mystery, too, has a place in the human story. As the Arctic winds sweep across the high plateaus of the north, one can still imagine the sound of the drum, deep, rhythmic,
echoing across snow and sky, and with each beat, another question rises unanswered.
We move now from the frozen tundra to yet another chapter in history's long and silent riddle. As the steady beat of the Siam drum fades into silence, we journey south through forests and plains across the shifting boundaries of ancient empires to the high plateau of the Bekaa Valley in modern-day Lebanon. Here, beneath the relentless sun and surrounded by the scars of time, lie ruins so vast, so immovable, they seem to defy logic itself. This is Baalbek. To the casual traveler, it is a site of collapsed columns and eroded temples once sacred to Jupiter, Venus, and Bacchus. But beneath the Roman grandeur lies something older, deeper, stranger. Embedded within the foundations of the Temple of Jupiter are three colossal stones, each weighing approximately 800 tons. Together, they form what is known as the Trilithon.
And no one knows how they got there.
Cut with unnerving precision and fitted so tightly that not even a blade of grass can slide between them. The Trilithon blocks are among the largest single stones ever moved by human hands. Or perhaps not moved at all. Each stone measures over 19 meters in length and 4 meters in height, resting several meters above ground level. There are no inscriptions, no records, no clear evidence of how they were quarried, shaped, transported, or raised. The ancient Romans built many wonders. Their engineering skills were unmatched in their time, but even their most ambitious projects, roads, aqueducts, amphitheaters, used stones far smaller than these. Roman builders did construct the temples atop the platform. But did they truly place the Trilithon itself? The questions begin in the quarry. Located about 800 mi from the temple complex, the quarry contains additional megaliths, one weighing more than 1,000 tons and another estimated at over 1,200. These stones, partially carved and never moved, remain lying in situ. This raises the first enigma. If the Romans or anyone had the means to transport and place 800-ton blocks, why leave these even larger stones behind? Was there a shift in plans, a loss of technology? Or were these efforts abandoned due to reasons lost in time? Mainstream archaeologists believe the stones were moved using rollers, sledges, and teams of laborers, perhaps thousands at once, working with ropes, levers, and carefully prepared tracks. Some proposed that wetting the earth could reduce friction, or that ancient builders constructed earthen ramps and inclined planes to slowly maneuver the blocks into place. And yet the sheer scale of the stones invites doubt. Even with today's technology, moving such massive monoliths would require highly specialized equipment, often in controlled conditions. In Baalbek, there is no clear evidence of infrastructure supporting such feats.
No ramps remain, no haulage paths, no pulleys, just the stones sitting quietly as if they have always been there.
This silence has drawn other voices. For centuries, locals referred to the site as the Temple of the Sun, linking it to earlier Semitic or Canaanite worship. Some historians believe the foundations may predate the Romans by 1,000 years or more, perhaps reaching back to the Phoenicians or even earlier to a lost pre-Roman civilization whose name has been forgotten. In the 19th century, explorers began to speculate that Baalbek's foundations were the remnants of an even older structure, repurposed by successive empires. Could the Trilon have been part of an earlier sacred platform, one the Romans merely built upon rather than created? More fringe theories push further still. Some suggest the Trilithon stones are relics of a lost advanced culture, perhaps the same that left behind other anomalous megalithic sites across the globe. Others point to the ancient myths of the Nephilim, the giants said to have lived in the Levant, or to tales of pre-flood civilizations with knowledge now lost. In these stories, Baalbek becomes not just a Roman temple complex, but a gateway to something far more ancient, a place where sky met stone and gods once walked among men. But even setting aside the myths, the questions remain grounded. Why was such enormous effort required for a platform? What purpose did these stones serve that smaller blocks could not? Was it symbolic, an expression of power through permanence? Or did the mass itself have meaning, perhaps related to stability, resonance, or even unseen forces? Some engineers have noted the geological quality of the stones. Carved from local limestone, their size may have been dictated by natural fissures in the rock, allowing large sections to be cut intact. But again, the cutting is only part of the story. Moving and positioning such stones with ancient tools remains one of the most baffling elements of the site, and then there is the alignment. Though not precisely oriented to celestial bodies like other ancient monuments, Baalbek's layout shows a careful design, its platforms and stairways arranged with mathematical clarity. Was this merely architectural discipline or something more? In the end, the source of the Baalbek trilithon is more than a question of who moved the stones. It is a question of memory, of civilizations layered one atop another, their intentions lost, their technologies unrecorded, of how much we assume we understand about the past, and how much still lies just beneath the surface, carved in stone but silent in meaning. The trilithon remains where it has for millennia, unmoved, unbroken, unyielding. It does not explain itself, it does not offer clues. It simply is, and perhaps that is its most haunting feature. We now leave Baalbek's quiet colossus and continue onward into the next puzzle, etched into the face of history. From the colossal stones of Baalbek, fixed in place as though untouched by time itself, we cross
oceans and descend into the mist.
Wrapped highlands of the Andes, where another enigma waits in silence, perched
on cliff edges and hidden in cloud-shrouded forests.
This is the land of the Chachapoa, the so-called cloud people of Peru. Their name alone evokes mystery. The Chachaoya is a Ketwa word that loosely translates to people of the clouds, a name bestowed by their Inca conquerors. Their true name, what they called themselves, has been lost. What remains are fragments of walls, tombs, bones and buildings clinging to the steepest slopes of the Amazonian Andes, where clouds drift like veils between what is seen and what is not. The Chachapoa lived in the cloud forests of northern Peru, where the high jungle meets the mountains in a surreal landscape of moss-covered trees, constant mist, and sudden drops into deep valleys. Their territory, rugged and remote, made it both a haven and a fortress. It is here that one of their most astonishing achievements still stands. Quap. Often dubbed the Machu Picchu of the north, Quap is a massive stone fortress built atop a ridge nearly 3,000 meters above sea level. Surrounded by walls up to 20 meters high, its interior contains over 400 circular stone buildings, many with friezes of zigzags, diamonds, and enigmatic patterns carved into the rock. Some believe Quap may have housed thousands. Others suggest it was a ceremonial center, a place of worship and burial. But unlike Inca cities, Quap does not follow strict urban geometry. It seems to have grown organically, layered, and evolved like a story built over time. But who were the Chachapoa really? Spanish chroniclers first wrote about them in the 16th century, describing a people tall, fair-skinned and fierce in battle. Some even claimed they had European features, blonde or red hair, pale complexions, descriptions that have fueled centuries of speculation. Were they an isolated genetic offshoot, a distinct Andean ethnicity, or is this simply myth-making layered atop unfamiliar faces? Archaeologically, the Chachapoa culture remains difficult to define. They left no written language. Most of what we know comes from their architecture, textiles, ceramics, and orrery practices. They built in stone, often in remote, near inaccessible places, on cliff faces, mountain tops, and ledges with no obvious path in or out. Their homes and tombs were circular, sometimes nested into natural formations, blending with the landscape. Perhaps most haunting are their burial sites. High above the Atcuba River, in places unreachable without ropes or ladders, Chachapoa sarcophagi, known as Puran Machis, stand like sentinels in stone. These anthropomorphic tombs, up to 3 mewelas tall, were crafted from clay and rock, painted with red pigment, and shaped to resemble human figures. They were placed in niches in vertical cliffs, seemingly defying gravity and logic.
Why such inaccessible places?
Was it protection from enemies or something more spiritual? An attempt to place the dead closer to the heavens?
And then there are the mummies.
In caves and tombs throughout the region, remarkably preserved Chachapoa mummies have been found. Some in fetal positions, others adorned with finely woven garments and feathered headdresses. Their preservation, likely aided by the cold, dry conditions of the highland caves, has allowed researchers a glimpse into their physical world, but not their beliefs. What gods did they worship? What rituals did they perform? Their myths, their cosmology, their language, all have vanished. The Inca eventually conquered the Chachapoa in the 15th century, incorporating them into their empire. Some say they fought bitterly. Others claim they became valuable allies, even forming elite military units. But within decades, the Spanish arrived, bringing disease, war, and collapse. Like many indigenous cultures, the Chachapoa were scattered, assimilated, and in many ways erased. Today, what remains is a mystery still partially hidden in the jungle.
New ruins continue to be discovered, often by accident.
Entire settlements, ceremonial centers, and burial complexes have been found beneath the forest canopy, their walls reclaimed by roots and moss. Some are so remote that they have never been fully mapped. Local legends speak of lost cities high in the mountains, built by the cloud people and protected by spirits who guard their secrets.
Could more be waiting to be found?
And if so, what might they tell us about a culture we barely understand? Speculation thrives in the absence of certainty. Some researchers suggest that Chachapoa may have been a confederation of diverse tribes rather than a single unified culture, perhaps explaining their wide geographical spread and varied architectural styles. Others propose that their cliff tombs may encode astronomical alignments, or that their burial practices reflect shamanic journeys intended to guide the soul through layers of the afterlife. Fringe theories go further. Still echoing the old Spanish descriptions, some claim the Chachapoya were descended from a long-lost European or Near Eastern people who arrived in South America centuries before Columbus. Genetic studies have not supported this, but the rumors persist, testaments to how compelling and how incomplete the story remains. So who were the Cloud People? Guardians of a hidden world? Engineers of stone and silence, a people who saw life, death and memory not as separate, but as one continuous passage, rising through fog, wrapped in jungle, watched over by their dead in the cliffs above. As the mist rolls in over Quap's crumbling towers, the past remains just out of reach, visible for a moment, then swallowed again by time and cloud. And so we continue our search from these forgotten heights to the next hidden truth in the vast tapestry of history's unsolved mysteries. As the clouds drift away from the silent ruins of the Chachapoa, we cross the Pacific and descend into the mists of another ancient world, one rooted not in mountaintops but in river valleys and royal courts. In the heart of what is now central China, where the Yangtze and Han rivers once cradled kingdoms, archaeologists uncovered a relic so elegant, so hauntingly preserved, that it seemed untouched by time itself. It was a sword buried in darkness for more than 2,000 years. They called it the Sword of Gujian. Discovered in 1965 in a tomb near Jinghao, Hubei province, the weapon was sheathed in a decayed wooden scabbard, sealed in an airtight box of lacquered wood. Yet when archaeologists drew the blade from its case, what they saw defied expectation. The bronze gleamed with a dark, reflective luster. Its edge was still sharp. Its etchings, precise and clean, glimmered like fresh ink. Time had not touched it. The sword bore an inscription in an ancient script. After careful analysis, experts identified it as belonging to King Gujian of Yu, a legendary ruler from the Spring and Autumn period, who reigned in the 5th century BC, a king once defeated, humiliated, and enslaved only to rise again and conquer his enemies through cunning and resolve. The weapon matched his legend. Graceful, deadly, enduring. But less well known is the second blade. Often referred to in hushed tones among scholars and museum curators, there exists a lesser studied fragment, what some call the broken sword of Gujian. Though rarely discussed in the same breath as its pristine counterpart, it too was found near Jinghao in the same general archaeological context. But unlike the famed blade, this one was incomplete. Its shaft was fractured, its symbols partially worn. And yet its craftsmanship, alloy composition, and stylistic features suggest it may have been forged by the same hands, perhaps even as a twin. Why was this second blade broken?
And what was its purpose?
Unlike the preserved sword, which has been displayed, studied, and celebrated, the broken sword remains cloaked in ambiguity. Its existence is referenced only briefly in a handful of excavation reports. Some scholars suggest it was a ceremonial replica shattered during burial rites. Others believe it may have belonged to a rival general or even an earlier version discarded during the perfection of the famed weapon. Still others propose something more unsettling, that the blade was deliberately broken, either to prevent its use, to curse its owner, or to mark the end of a legacy better forgotten. In ancient Chinese traditions, swords were not merely weapons, they were extensions of power, honor, and the spirit of the warrior. To break a sword was no small act. It could mean disgrace, or it could serve as a ritual of closure, severing ties with the past or binding a soul to its final resting place. The metallurgy of both swords reveals an advanced understanding of materials for the time. The bronze is alloyed with tin and small amounts of lead, producing a metal both flexible and durable. The surface is etched with a diamond pattern, possibly to reduce oxidation. But what has drawn even greater attention is the chemical coating on the blade, a thin layer of chromium oxide that has resisted corrosion for millennia. How did artisans from 2,500 years ago master techniques so refined that even modern scientists struggled to replicate them? Some suggest this was the result of empirical craftsmanship, centuries of trial and error honed over generations. Others point to lost knowledge, metalwork techniques that disappeared in the chaos of dynastic upheaval and war. And then there are those who ask, what if the broken sword was part of an experiment, a test in alloy ratios or blade tempering that failed or succeeded too well? Speculative theories have emerged, as they often do in the shadows of uncertainty. A few researchers argue that the broken blade contains alloy traces not present in other known examples from the period, hinting at a secret forge or external influence. One fringe theory suggests it may be older than the Gujian period entirely, a reworked relic reforged to serve a new king. Another idea posits that the break itself was not a result of time or ritual but violence, a failed assassination attempt, a betrayal, a final battle lost to history.
If so, whose blood did it spill?
And why is its story silent? We may never know. The broken sword of Gujian rests in storage, far from public view, its fragments rarely exhibited and seldom studied in detail. Some suggest this is due to its poor condition. Others whisper of political motives, of state interest in highlighting victory and perfection over ambiguity and loss. After all, the intact sword tells a story of resilience, triumph, and unbroken will. The broken one tells something else. Today, as China preserves and digitizes its vast archaeological heritage, questions about the broken sword remain unanswered. Is it an unfinished footnote in the Gujian saga?
A failed prototype, a second chapter buried intentionally, or is it the key to a deeper story, one the Earth offered up too soon before we were ready to understand?
As light fades over the burial mounds of Jingzhou, and the wind moves softly through the reeds of the Yangtze, one is left to wonder, in a land of ancient empires and forgotten wars, how many stories remain broken beneath the soil, just waiting to be pieced together? We continue through time's scattered relics toward the next mystery, written in silence. From the silent fragments of a broken sword buried beneath China's earth, we now step into a world carved not in bronze but in stone, where stories do not crumble with time but instead endure, etched in sweeping detail across temple walls. Our journey takes us to the town of Halebidu in the southern Indian state of Karnataka, where a masterpiece of sacred geometry and enigmatic art quietly awaits. This is the Hosaleswara Temple, constructed in the 12th century during the reign of King Vishnuvardhana of the Huala dynasty. The temple is dedicated to Lord Shiva and stands today as one of the crowning achievements of Indian temple architecture. Its outer walls, built from soapstone, are draped in thousands of exquisitely detailed bas-reliefs, intricately carved panels that wind like a continuous thread around the temple's double sanctum. They tell stories from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, scenes from daily life, divine battles, celestial processions, and abstract geometric patterns of staggering precision. But not all the stories they tell are fully understood. At first glance, the carvings seem to follow a narrative sequence, epic episodes arranged in orderly succession. Yet upon closer inspection, scholars and visitors alike have noticed something strange. Not all the reliefs align with known versions of Hindu mythology. Some scenes depict unfamiliar characters, out-of-place weapons, and curious motifs that are absent in canonical texts. Other panels blur the line between divine and human, dream and reality. Who carved these scenes and why include stories no one can explain? The temple sculptors were part of a guild known for their mastery of detail and layered symbolism. Each figure down to the tilt of a head or the curl of a finger carries meaning, yet scattered throughout the carvings are moments that resist easy categorization. A man holding what appears to be a conical object pointed skyward, a creature with a human torso but bird-like feet, a female figure with what some interpret as a stylized map carved behind her. Mainstream historians have explained these anomalies as symbolic representations or artistic liberties. But for others, these details feel deliberate, intentional inclusions whose meanings are now lost. The mystery deepens with the astronomical motifs found along certain panels. One frieze, often overlooked, appears to map planetary bodies in a linear sequence. Another shows a solar eclipse framed by what resembles a pair of concentric rings, an arrangement some have interpreted as a reference to cyclical time or Yuga cosmology. Were these merely symbolic embellishments, or did the sculptors embed astronomical knowledge within sacred narratives? Some scholars suggest that the bas reliefs may preserve oral traditions or regional versions of mythologies that were never codified in text. Local epics, tribal stories, or syncretic deities long since forgotten. Others wonder whether some carvings depict historical events cloaked in religious language, rebellions, foreign visitors, or astronomical phenomena interpreted through a spiritual lens. A particularly puzzling set of panels on the southern wall depicts what seems to be a battle, but not between gods and demons. Instead, the figures wear unfamiliar armor, wield weapons unlike those found elsewhere in Indian art, and ride creatures not easily identified. Some researchers have called this the foreign war sequence, speculating that it might depict an encounter with outside forces. Were the Hualas referencing real military campaigns, foreign incursions? Or could these be metaphorical wars representing spiritual battles now lost to interpretation? The carvings also showcase a degree of mathematical complexity that has puzzled architects. Some friezes contain repeating fractal-like motifs nested within each other with near-perfect symmetry. Mandalas, knots, and geometric lattices are arranged with such precision that scholars have speculated about the use of advanced tools or mathematical knowledge far ahead of its time. And then there are the faces among the divine and the mythical. Some faces carved into the stone appear strangely modern, subtle, expressive, almost lifelike in a way that diverges from the stylized norms of the era.
Could they have been portraits?
Were they patrons, teachers, or seers immortalized in the temple's language of stone? Or were they symbolic, representing ideas rather than individuals? The Hoy Alazwara temple was never fully completed. Historical records suggest that construction was halted, perhaps due to war, political turmoil, or shifting royal priorities. And yet the carvings seem to carry on as though the builders knew their work would endure without an ending, like a story deliberately left open, waiting for interpretation. Over the centuries, many of the temple's finer details have been weathered by time, worn smooth by monsoon rains and the touch of countless hands. Yet enough remains to suggest that the temple was more than a place of worship. It was a repository of knowledge, a canvas of myth, science, memory, and perhaps something more. A message in stone, and if it was a message, who was it for? Was the temple meant to preserve a forgotten cosmology? Did the sculptors encode knowledge too dangerous or sacred to be written down? Or is the mystery simply a reflection of our own distance from the world that carved it, where spiritual and material truth flowed together with no clear division? Today, as pilgrims and historians walk slowly along the temple's ancient walls, eyes scanning the endless processions of gods, warriors, animals, and shapes, one cannot help but feel that something is speaking, but in a language we no longer fully understand. Perhaps the true purpose of the Hoy Salazwara bas reliefs lies not in what they show, but in what they withhold. We continue then to the next enigma, another fragment of the past, whispering through the silence of time. From the intricate carvings of Ho Salazwara, where stone seems to whisper the forgotten stories of gods and kings. We turn now to a fragment, just a sliver of basalt, weathered, broken, incomplete, and yet it may hold one of the most debated references in biblical archaeology. Unearthed in the far north of modern-day Israel at the archaeological site of Teldon, this modest shard of stone has stirred decades of controversy, raised more questions than answers, and cast a long shadow over the ancient past of the Levant. It is known as the Teldon Sul fragment. The stone was discovered in 1993 by archaeologist Abraham Biren during an excavation of the city gate complex at Teldon, a city once strategically placed along the northern frontier of the ancient kingdom of Israel. The fragment was found reused as building material in a later wall, its inscription partially obscured by time and erosion. But when cleaned and studied, the broken lines of Aramaic script revealed something extraordinary. Among them were the words, "House of David." It was the first time this phrase had ever been found in an ancient inscription outside the biblical text. To some, it was confirmation, an independent contemporaneous reference to King David, the legendary ruler of the United Monarchy of Israel around the 10th century BC. To others, it was something less definitive, an ambiguous phrase open to interpretation, possibly even a misreading. So what is the Teldon Stele? Most scholars agree it was a victory monument, a royal inscription commemorating the military conquests of an Aramean king, likely Hazael of Damascus, who ruled in the 9th century BC. The fragment mentions a king of Israel, a king of the house of David, and describes a military defeat. The language is Aramaic, the phrasing formal, the tone triumphant. But the significance lies not in the boast, but in the name House of David. Was this the first archaeological proof that David, the biblical king, was a historical figure, or simply that a dynasty calling itself by that name had risen by the 9th century BC? Interpretations vary. Some see the inscription as powerful evidence that the Davidic line was known and recognized by Israel's neighbors within a century or two of its supposed founding. The Stele's author, an enemy of Israel, would have no motive to fabricate such a title. It suggests that David was more than a myth, that his name and perhaps his legacy had political currency. But others remain cautious. The stone is broken, the script worn. The reading of House of David by TWWD is widely accepted but not universally agreed upon. Some scholars have suggested alternative translations, perhaps House of the Beloved, or even a place name now lost. And even if it does refer to David, does that confirm his historicity or merely the use of a dynastic title echoing a tradition already in place? What further complicates matters is the near absence of archaeological evidence for a grand united monarchy in the 10th century BC Jerusalem. David's supposed capital shows signs of occupation in that period, but not on the scale described in the biblical texts. Some argue this reflects the bias of the archaeological record. Others see it as a reason to question the historical David altogether. The Teldon Stele then stands in the middle of a scholarly divide between those who view the Bible as a historical source and those who see it as theological literature rooted in myth and memory. And the fragment doesn't speak only of David. It also mentions the kings of Israel and Judah, likely Jehoram of Israel and Ahazia of Judah, describing them as slain in battle. These events loosely align with biblical accounts in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles, though the details differ. Is the Stele correcting the record or offering a rival version of the past? Like much of ancient history, the truth lies somewhere between the lines and the cracks. Fringe theories have emerged, though rarely accepted in academic circles. Some suggest that the Stele might have been forged in antiquity for political propaganda, or that it represents an attempt by Aramean rulers to rewrite history in their favor. Others question the context of its discovery. Was it truly found in secondary use? Could more fragments remain undiscovered beneath Teldon's soil? And what of the larger stele, the parts that are missing? Was the reference to David a passing Detail in a broader narrative or part of a focused message carved with the intent of asserting dominance over both geography and memory. The Telden stele in the end is a fragment of a larger puzzle both literally and symbolically. It gives us a glimpse but not the whole image. It teases with specificity, then pulls back into ambiguity. And perhaps that's what makes it so haunting. It seems to answer a question even as it deepens the mystery. In a land where stone remembers what stories forget, where myth and history blur beneath the weight of time, the Telden fragment offers a single carved whisper that a name David once mattered enough to record and perhaps to conquer. But why? And what else remains buried, waiting to change the story once again? We move now from fragment to enigma, as the search for lost truths continues through the ruins of our collective past, from the highlands of ancient Israel, where a shattered stone whispers of kings and forgotten battles, we journey southward across desert and savanna through the shifting landscapes of East Africa until we reach the coral stone ruins of a once glittering city by the sea. This is Kilwa Kisiwani, an island just off the coast of modern-day Tanzania. Now quiet, partially reclaimed by time and tide, Kilwa was once a jewel of the Swahili coast, a center of commerce, culture, and influence whose reach stretched across the Indian Ocean. Stone mosques, crumbling palaces, and the remains of grand merchant homes still line the shoreline, bearing silent witness to a city that flourished between the 9th and 16th centuries. From here, ivory, gold, porcelain, and slaves passed through. Vast maritime networks linking Africa with Arabia, Persia, India, and even China. But among Kilwa's many legacies, few are more puzzling than a handful of ancient, weather-worn objects, a collection of coins, some clearly minted by Kilwa sultans, and others that seem to defy explanation. These are the unknown coins of Kilwa. The known coinage of Kilwa is remarkable in its own right, struck in gold and copper bearing Arabic inscriptions. They reflect a sophisticated economy and Islamic identity. Many are inscribed with the names of local rulers, Sultans Ali Hassan, Suleiman Ibn al-Hassan, and others whose reigns helped shape the fortunes of the Swahili coast. Yet these coins are rare. Very few have been found in Kilwa itself. Most are known from museum collections or isolated discoveries along the East African coast. And then there are the other coins. In 1944, during World War II, an Australian soldier named Maury Eisenberg was stationed on Marchinbar Island, part of the remote Wessel Islands off the northern coast of Australia. While fishing during his off-duty hours, he stumbled across several corroded coins buried in the sand. At first, he thought little of them and stored them in a tin. It wasn't until decades later, when he brought them to a museum, that their significance was recognized. Among the group were coins from the Dutch East India Company dating to the 17th century. But 5 of the coins were much older. They were minted in Kilwa, likely between the 12th and 14th centuries. How did Kilwa coins, African coins, end up on a remote Australian island thousands of miles from their place of origin? Mainstream historians offered cautious theories. Perhaps they were carried by Indonesian sailors who traded with Kilwa indirectly through Muslim Indian Ocean networks. Perhaps they were dropped by later Dutch or Portuguese explorers who had collected them as curiosities. Some even suggested that a storm-battered vessel centuries ago may have wrecked on these distant shores, scattering its contents into the sand. But none of these explanations fully account for the strange context in which the coins were found, isolated, without other East African artifacts, and far outside known historical trade routes of the time. And these were not the only enigmatic coins tied to Kilwa. In the years following Eisenberg's discovery, more coins have been reported. some by collectors, others by archaeologists bearing inscriptions or imagery not clearly identified with any known Kilwa sultan. Some appear to mimic the Arabic calligraphy of genuine Kilwa dinars, but lack royal names. Others display geometric motifs inconsistent with Islamic numismatic standards. A few remain completely undeciphered. Are these local imitations, experimental issues, or could they represent a lost phase in Kilwa's monetary history, one not recorded in chronicles or surviving texts? Complicating matters is the fact that Kilwa's written history is sparse. The Kilwa Chronicle, an oral tradition eventually recorded by Portuguese chroniclers, mixes legend and history freely. Archaeological evidence confirms Kilwa's prosperity and wide influence, but details of its internal politics, rulers, and commercial practices remain fragmented. And then there is the deeper mystery. How far did Kilwa's influence really reach? Some researchers, inspired by the Marchinbar find, have proposed that ancient East African sailors may have traveled farther than previously believed. Could Swahili, navigators or those they traded with, have ventured as far as Southeast Asia? Could Kilwa coins have circulated as far as Indonesia or even the Pacific? There is no direct evidence. And yet the movement of ancient peoples was often far more complex than once assumed. Fringe theories have leapt further. Some suggest that the Kilwa coins in Australia are evidence of pre-EU contact between Africa and Australia, a maritime link long lost to history. Others propose they were brought by shipwrecked sailors who formed undocumented contact with Aboriginal communities. A few even argue for a now-forgotten trading outpost or exploratory expedition from the Swahili world, though no supporting material culture has ever been found. So what are we left with? A few scattered coins, an isolated discovery in a distant land, inscriptions only partially legible, and silence where records should be. Kilwa Kisiwani, now a quiet archaeological site, was once described by the 14th century traveller Ibn Battuta as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Its coral stone walls, mosques and domes spoke of refinement, power and connection. Its people navigated the monsoons with skill, charting routes from the African coast to the heart of the Indian Ocean. But perhaps they went farther. The coins, those known and those still unidentified, ask us to look beyond the familiar story, beyond the mapped trade routes and named kingdoms. They remind us that history is rarely linear, that objects can travel in silence, detached from their makers, carrying secrets they never intended to reveal. Could more Kilwa coins be hidden in the sands of distant shores? Could they tell us not just about a lost economy, but about lost journeys, forgotten voyages across seas that no longer remember their names? For now, they remain as they are, small, weathered, unassuming, and deeply mysterious. We turn the page once again toward the next enigma, waiting in the long, uncertain tide of history. From the sunlit ruins of Kilwa, where ancient coins whisper of forgotten voyages across the Indian Ocean, we journey north beyond the Mediterranean's shifting tides and onto the rugged hills of southern Euboea, Greece. Here, far from the bustling streets of Athens and the well-mapped ruins of Mycenaean palaces, a different kind of mystery rests quietly in stone. They are known as the dragon houses, ancient megalithic structures whose origin, purpose, and even name remain cloaked in uncertainty. Scattered across the mountain slopes of Euboea, particularly around Mount Ochi and Mount Styra, these enigmatic buildings are unlike anything else in Greek archaeology. Constructed from massive limestone blocks, often weighing several tons, the stones were laid without mortar, dry-fitted so precisely that they have withstood centuries of weathering and seismic activity. Some roofs are capped with enormous stone slabs measuring over 4 meters long, resting improbably atop unmortared walls. The architecture is stark, functional, and oddly powerful. They are called dragon houses, Draospita, not because of any mythological creature carved into their walls, but because local legend once claimed that dragons, in the form of giant supernatural beings, built and inhabited them. The term dragon in Greek folklore often referred not to flying beasts, but to beings of vast strength and mysterious origin. Who then built these structures and why? Despite their clear antiquity, the dragon houses do not appear in ancient Greek texts. No mention of them exists in the writings of Herodotus, Pausanias, or Pliny. They seem to have existed outside the awareness or concern of the classical world. When scholars rediscovered them in the 18th and 19th centuries, they were already in ruin, already legends. No inscriptions have been found, no pottery to date them with certainty, no artifacts to place them within the known rhythms of ancient Greek life. Mainstream archaeologists have offered cautious theories. Some propose that the dragon houses were ancient sanctuaries or shelters for shepherds and highland herders. Others suggest they may have been storage houses, military watches, or even early temples. Radiocarbon dating of organic remains found nearby has placed some of the sites roughly between the 6th and 2nd centuries BC. Though this remains a matter of debate, the architecture, however, feels older, out of place, even within archaic Greece. One of the best preserved structures stands at top Mount Ochi, near the southeastern tip of Yuba. Reaching it requires a steep hike through rocky terrain and wind-swept paths. But once at the summit, the dragon house rises unexpectedly. Massive, silent, its roof formed by 3 giant stone slabs weighing several tons each. No metal clamps, no wooden beams, just stone, balanced and unmoved. Was it a temple to Zeus, as some have speculated, a shrine to an unknown mountain deity, or something more practical, more terrestrial, built to survive harsh winters or to mark a sacred boundary? Still, certain details resist easy explanation. The entrances are narrow and low, requiring visitors to stoop to enter. The interiors, though simple, are aligned with precision. Some researchers have noted astronomical alignments, particularly at the Mount Ochi Dragon House, where the doorway appears to frame the rising sun on significant days of the year. Was this intentional? Were the builders observing solstices, equinoxes, or the passage of stars? Other speculative theories suggest these buildings were part of a pre-Hellenic megalithic tradition, possibly linked to cultures long vanished from the historical record. The use of massive unmortared stones evokes comparisons to Menian Cyclopean architecture, or even further back to the Neolithic megaliths of Malta and the Mediterranean basin. Could the dragon houses be relics of a much older architectural language, one that survived in isolated pockets long after its builders disappeared? And then there are the legends. Local stories passed down through generations tell of giant beings, neither gods nor men, who once lived on the mountain and built these homes of stone. They speak of dragons as guardians, not beasts, and of energies that still linger in the rocks. Hikers and pilgrims to the sites often speak of an eerie stillness, a presence that defies explanation. Fringe theorists, as expected, have woven their own narratives. Some claim the dragon houses are markers of geomagnetic anomalies built on energy lines or ley lines known to ancient engineers. Others believe they were built by an unknown civilization, perhaps one that predates classical Greece entirely, and that the structures hold encoded knowledge hidden in their measurements and alignments. There is, of course, no physical evidence for such ideas, but the absence of answers continues to invite speculation. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the dragon houses is their isolation. They do not form part of any broader settlement. They are not clustered like villages nor linked by roads or walls. Each seems to exist independently, as if placed with purpose, watching over valleys, guarding mountain passes, or simply waiting in solitude. Why were they built where they are, and why were they abandoned? The stones do not speak. The soil holds few clues, and the legends, though rich, offer more questions than truths. Today, the dragon houses remain largely untouched by tourism. They are difficult to reach, difficult to explain, and impossible to forget. They are not grand like the Acropolis, nor mythologized like Delphi, but in their quiet endurance, they challenge our assumptions about what the ancient world left behind. What kind of people moved these stones? What knowledge did they possess now lost? What was so important that they built with such scale and then vanished without record? Perhaps the dragon houses are reminders not just of what we do not know, but of how much we once knew then forgot. As we descend the mountain and look back, the stone roof still catching the last light of the day, we carry that question with us, and so the mystery deepens as we continue our search for what history still keeps hidden just beneath the surface. From the wind-swept peaks of Euboea and the stone-built enigmas of the dragon houses, we follow the arc of ancient memory eastward across the Mayan beyond Mesopotamia into the sun-drenched highlands of western Iran. Here, among the golden hills and worn ridgelines of the Kermanshah province, rises a ruined platform, its fractured columns and broad terraces catching the changing light of day like an echo from another age. This is Kangavar, a name both modern and ancient, and at its heart lies a puzzle known simply as the Temple of Anahita. The structure sprawls across the base of a slope overlooking the modern town. Rows of towering stone blocks form a massive rectangular platform more than 200 meters wide, rising above the plain. From afar it seems like a forgotten citadel, but up close the stonework reveals a deeper story of columns in Greek style, of staircases reminiscent of Achaemenid palaces, and of architectural elements that don't quite belong together. Who built this place and for what purpose? The name Temple of Anahita was first attached to the ruins in the 19th century by European travelers and archaeologists, many inspired by a single ancient text. The Roman historian Isidore of Harax, writing in the 1st century AD, noted that in this region stood a grand temple dedicated to Anahita, the Persian goddess of water, fertility and healing. It was said to be built by Artaxerxes II in the 4th century BC, a ruler known for promoting the cult of Anahita across the Achaemenid Empire. Was Kangavar that temple? On the surface, the idea seems plausible. Anita was one of the most venerated deities of the Iranian plateau. Her cult was centered on rivers, springs, and sacred pools, places where purity and renewal intertwined. The ruins at Kangavar occupy a site near a spring. The platform scale is immense, suitable for a major religious center, and the monumental staircases do evoke the grandeur of Persepolis, suggesting a royal initiative. But as with so many ancient sites, the evidence resists simple conclusions. No inscriptions have been found to link the site definitively to Anahita. No statues or dedicatory tablets remain. The style of the architecture is confusing. Some elements recall Hellenistic influence. Others suggest Sasanian or even Parthian construction. The columns, for instance, are built in a style that postdates the Achaemenids, resembling those seen in Greek temples, not Persian ones, and the platform itself lacks the refined polish of imperial Achaemenid works. Was this temple begun in one era, then continued in another, or was it built later in imitation of a lost original? Excavations have been sporadic and inconclusive. Some archaeologists believe the structure dates to the Parthian period, possibly between the 1st century BC and 3rd century AD. Others argue for Sasanian origins, closer to the 4th or 5th centuries AD. A few maintain that the site might include layers of construction, each dynasty building atop or repurposing the ruins of its predecessor. If true, then Kangavar may not be a temple in the singular sense, but a palimpsest of faith and power written in stone and eroded by time. And then there is the matter of its goddess.
Anita herself is a mystery.
In early Iranian texts, she is both divine and elemental, the embodiment of sacred waters that nourish all life. She is described in the Avesta as strong, beautiful, and unyielding. Later, under Hellenistic influence, she merges with other female deities, Artemis, Aphrodite, and even Ishtar. In iconography, she appears both as a warrior queen and a mother goddess, crowned, armored, and holding sacred vessels. But at Kangavar, no such imagery survives. Did her worship here leave no trace, or has it simply not yet been uncovered? Speculative theories have filled the void. Some suggest the site was never truly a temple at all, but an unfinished royal monument, a palace or administrative center with ceremonial overtones. Others propose it was a kind of syncretic sanctuary blending Persian and Hellenistic styles where multiple deities may have been honored together in a transitional period of cultural flux. A few fringe ideas reach further still, arguing that Kangavar's unusual proportions and astronomical orientation point to celestial alignments, or that the site encodes sacred geometry inherited from older Mesopotamian cults. There is little evidence for these claims, but their persistence underscores one fact: the site does not explain itself. And perhaps the most haunting mystery lies not in the stones that stand, but in those that never were. Vast parts of the platform remain incomplete. Sections of wall are missing. Columns rise abruptly and then stop. There is a sense of abandonment of a project begun with ambition and then mysteriously halted.
Why was the temple ever finished?
Was it destroyed? Or did shifting dynasties lose interest, leaving behind a structure whose purpose was soon forgotten? Today, Kangavar is a site in quiet limbo. Excavation is limited, tourism is sparse, and the ruins exposed to sun and wind seem to speak not of triumph, but of unfinished intentions, a sacred space that never quite found its voice. The Temple of Anahita, if that's what it truly is, offers a question in architectural form. It reminds us that not all mysteries are buried. Some remain in plain sight, visible, monumental, yet unclaimed by certainty. Was this the house of a goddess, a royal platform, or something else entirely, born of a
vision that we can no longer see?
As the sun sets behind the hills of western Iran, casting long shadows across the fractured stones, one is left with the sense that something is still hidden here just beneath, the dust just beyond understanding. And so we continue into the next chamber of the past, where silence is part of the message and the mystery endures. From the half-built grandeur of Kangavar, where the goddess Anahita may have once been worshipped in silence and stone, we now move to a far older past, one not carved in granite, but woven in thread. In a quiet corner of the University College, London's Petrie Museum lies a relic so delicate, so easily overlooked, that its age and significance seem almost impossible. It is not a statue or a sarcophagus. It is not a golden amulet or a hieroglyphic tablet. It is a simple garment, frayed, pleated, and faded with time. It is called the Tarkon dress, and it may be the oldest known woven garment in the world. Discovered in 1913 by archaeologist Flinders Petrie during excavations of a necropolis at Tarkon just south of Cairo, the dress was found among a bundle of textiles hastily packed and stored. For decades, its true significance remained unknown until in the 1970s. It was unfolded, studied, and identified not just as an ancient tunic, but as one that had been worn. Radioarbon dating would later confirm what its fragile fibers hinted at. The linen was made between 3482 and 312 BC, placing it firmly in Egypt's late pre-dynastic period, before pyramids, before hieroglyphs, before kings wore crowns. And yet the dress is no crude relic. Its form is remarkably sophisticated. The garment was tailored from fine linen with tight vertical pleats running down the bodice and sleeves and a V-shaped neckline. It falls just above the knees with seams carefully stitched and reinforced. It is not the work of amateurs. It is the product of a practiced hand designed not only for utility but with style. Who wore it? Was it made for a woman of high status, a temple dancer, a young noble? The tomb in which it was found offered no specific context, only bundles of linen jumbled together, unnamed and unclaimed. What society existed in 3400 BC with the time, resources, and aesthetic sensibility to create such a garment? And how much of that society remains buried, its stories untold? Mainstream historians see the Taran dress as a remarkable testament to the sophistication of early Egyptian textile production. Linen woven from flax was already well developed by the late Neolithic in the Nile Valley. Spindles, looms, and weaving tools have been found in settlements dating back thousands of years, but rarely does such material survive the ages. What makes the Taran dress exceptional is not only its age, but its preservation. Egypt's dry desert conditions combined with the careful wrapping of textiles in tombs allowed organic material to endure. But even so, clothing of this era is almost never recovered intact. Most ancient textiles crumble, fragment, or disappear altogether, and so the dress preserved through time and chance becomes more than an artifact. It becomes a window, narrow, fragile, into a world just beyond reach. Some researchers have suggested that the pleating and construction of the dress point to ritual or ceremonial use. Others argue it may have been everyday wear for the elite, fine, but not necessarily sacred. Still others wonder if the dress's design hints at deeper cultural norms, ideas of modesty, beauty, gender roles, and movement. What did it mean to be dressed in linen at the dawn of Egypt's civilization? What did this garment communicate to others, to the gods, to the wearer herself? And more speculative theories have followed. A few fringe researchers note the dress's surprisingly modern silhouette, its pleating, its shaping, its tailored seams. Some claim these techniques are inconsistent with what we should expect from such an early period. Could the knowledge behind its construction have come from a lost culture, one absorbed by early Egypt? Or does it speak to a forgotten chapter in textile history, a level of craftsmanship that arose briefly and then vanished? Others focus on the symbolism of linen itself. In Egyptian religious texts from later periods, linen was sacred, used in the wrapping of the dead, in the robes of priests, in temple rituals. Could the Taran dress represent an early connection between fabric and spiritual identity? Was it woven for life or for death? Perhaps most intriguing is what the dress doesn't tell us. There are no inscriptions on it, no tags or maker's marks, no dyes or embellishments. It offers no clear indication of where it was made or by whom. It does not speak, yet it suggests an entire world of domestic industry, female labor, and personal expression that has long been neglected in archaeological narratives. Who spun the flax? Who were the cloth? Who stitched the pleats? Folded the seams and shaped the neckline? And why, after so many millennia, does this one piece of fabric remain when nearly everything else from that world has vanished? The Taran dress is a contradiction, ancient yet refined, fragile yet enduring. It is evidence not only of survival but of intention, the desire to craft something beautiful, to clothe the body in more than function. Perhaps the dress survived because it was loved. Or perhaps it was never meant to be worn again, placed in a tomb as a gesture of care, a final offering. Either way, it now exists as one of history's most delicate puzzles. It asks us to imagine a person we'll never know, living in a time barely documented, wearing a garment we can still see today. It reminds us that the past is not always monumental. Sometimes it is soft, intimate, stitched together from strands we barely understand. As the linen threads stretch across 5,000 years, we are left with a single quiet question.
What else has been woven into history and hidden in plain sight?
We move on now deeper into the unknown, where each artifact, no matter how small, may contain a story waiting to be told. From the woven threads of Egypt's distant past, where the Taran dress offers a whisper of individuality across millennia, we turn now to bones, ancient, weathered, and oversized, a different kind of trace, one not of fabric, but of flesh, not of elegance, but of enigma. It begins in southern France in the quiet commune of Castelnau-Lele, near the city of Montpellier. The year is 1890. The ground is being excavated. Routine archaeological work in a burial mound known as the Bronze Age Cemetery of Castel. Now the soil is dry, dark, and dense with time. But then something unusual emerges. Not just bones, but enormous ones. A thigh bone, an upper arm, a portion of a humerus, all far larger than any normal human anatomy. So large, in fact, that the French anthropologist Vacher de Lauge, who oversaw the excavation, hesitated. He measured the remains carefully, compared them to known human proportions, and then with cautious language published his findings in the journal L'Anneur. If the bones were genuine, Lepoux noted they belonged to a human standing well over 3.5 meters tall, more than 11 ft he called the giant of Castel. Now at the time, anthropology was a young science filled with competing theories and colonial biases. The discovery sparked interest, skepticism, and silence. The bones were reportedly sent to the University of Montpellier for further analysis, but what became of them afterward is unclear. No comprehensive study was published. No second examination followed. The bones seem to have disappeared from public view. Were they lost, misclassified, or quietly shelved due to their unsettling implications? What makes the story endure is not just the size of the remains, but the way the event sits on the edge of plausibility. Lauge was a trained academic. He documented his measurements, noted their irregularity, and stopped short of wild conclusions. He acknowledged the bones were very large, but refrained from declaring them inhuman or mythical. His tone was restrained, curious, and yet he too could not explain them. Could they have belonged to a pathological case? A person suffering from extreme gigantism. Medical conditions such as acromegaly can cause excessive growth, especially if triggered in early development. The tallest recorded modern human, such as Robert Wadlow, reached heights of nearly 9 feet but 11 ft or more. That pushes even the extreme cases beyond known limits. Others have asked, could the bones have been misidentified? Could they have been animal remains misinterpreted due to wear or distortion over time? Some have pointed to mammoth femurs or large fossilized remains of prehistoric fauna, but Lauge was no amateur. He specialized in physical anthropology. He had access to comparative collections, and his notes specify human morphology, bone density, articulation points, and anatomical consistency that, in his view, could not be explained by animal origin. Still, without the bones today, the mystery remains open to interpretation. What complicates the case further is its singularity. While there are scattered reports throughout history of oversized skeletons, from biblical tales of Nephilim to Native American oral traditions, few have been documented with the kind of clinical language Lau used. Most stories fall into the realm of folklore, exaggeration, hoaxes. But the Castelnau bones briefly and quietly stood apart. They occupy that liminal space in historical science, documented but not replicated, physical but not accessible, curious but not conclusive. Fringe theorists, unsurprisingly, have woven the giant of Castelnau into larger narratives. Some suggest the bones are evidence of an ancient race of giants, wiped out by catastrophe or hidden in plain sight. Others claim they were suppressed by academic institutions unwilling to challenge mainstream evolutionary models.
A few go further still, connecting them to lost
Civilizations like Atlantis or Lemura. Civilizations ruled in these speculative worlds by beings of great stature and forgotten knowledge. But without the bones, these remain stories, compelling, unverifiable. Mainstream archaeologists remain cautious. Some acknowledge the possibility of unusual growth anomalies, but note the lack of supporting remains from the same region or period. Others point to the poor preservation of skeletal material in general and suggest that Lauge's find, if real, may have been unique, a biological outlier rather than a revelation. And yet, the mystery persists. In 1950, additional large bones were reportedly discovered in the same general region. The find was less publicized and quickly dismissed as animal remains. But for those who believe in patterns, these fragments feed a lingering question. Was Castell now an anomaly or a clue? If the bones still exist, perhaps mislabeled in a university archive or buried in a forgotten drawer, could modern science reveal their origin? Could DNA testing, isotope analysis, and modern osteological methods solve what 19th century tools could not? Or was this, as some believe, a story destined to vanish like so many unearthed truths that do not fit the dominant narrative? The Giant of Castell now is not about belief. It is about the boundary between what is known and what is not, between measured fact and speculative wonder.
A femur, a humerus, a fragment of a jaw.
These were the keys to a body larger than life and perhaps larger than memory. But until they are found again, if they ever are, we are left only with the words of a cautious scientist and the enduring silence of the earth that once gave up something strange. And so we move forward once more deeper into the shadows of the historical record, where what is buried is not always forgotten, and what is forgotten may not yet be lost. From the strange proportions of the Giant of Castelnau in southern France, we shift now to an altogether different riddle, smaller in scale but no less baffling. Our journey carries us across continents to the dry heart of the Arabian Peninsula, where wind-swept plains stretch endlessly beneath an unforgiving sun. The land here seems desolate, eternal. But beneath the sand, scattered like forgotten seeds, are stone tools that whisper of hands long vanished. And some of those tools should not exist. They are called Neolithic fluted points, stone projectiles found in Arabia that mirror a style believed to be unique to ancient North America, sharp, symmetrical, and marked by a long groove or flute. Fluted points were once considered a signature of early Native American cultures, such as the Clovis and Folsom peoples. These flutes weren't decorative. They were functional, allowing the point to be hafted securely onto a spear or shaft, increasing its aerodynamic performance and lethality. For nearly a century, archaeologists believed that fluting was a technological innovation exclusive to the Americas, appearing around 13,000 years ago. So, when remarkably similar fluted points began turning up in sites across southern Arabia, scholars were stunned. How could the same intricate technique, one that involves controlled removal of a flake from the base of a stone spearhead, emerge in two regions separated by oceans, continents, and cultures? Coincidence? Convergence, or something else? The Arabian fluted points have been found in Oman, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia, dating back at least 8,000 years, possibly more. They are crafted from local stone, flint, and demonstrate a high degree of skill. The fluting technique is unmistakable. Some pieces are fractured as if discarded mid-production, testifying to the difficulty and risk involved. One wrong strike and hours of work could be ruined. This wasn't casual tool-making, it was a refined craft, passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. But where did it come from? Mainstream archaeologists are divided. Some believe the similarity to North American fluted points is a case of independent invention, a remarkable example of technological convergence where different societies facing similar challenges arrive at similar solutions. In both cases, mobile hunter-gatherer groups in arid or semi-arid environments may have found that fluted points offered improved hunting efficiency, and thus the same method appeared continents apart.
Others are not so sure.
While fluting could have been invented more than once, it is a highly specific and labor-intensive technique. Why would two cultures with no known contact and different stone tool traditions both adopt such an intricate method and abandon it after a few thousand years? The possibility of cultural diffusion that some unknown interaction or migration connected early. Americans with Neolithic Arabs has been floated but lacks evidence. There are no known trans-oceanic contacts between these populations in prehistory, and the chronological mismatch raises further questions. The Arabian points are younger than the earliest Clovis tools, but old enough to suggest they were not copied from recent influences. And yet the resemblance is striking.
Could it be that fluting was once more widespread?
An ancient global tradition that only survived in 2 regions? Were there forgotten migrations across now submerged land bridges or coastlines? Did early human groups carry the seeds of this knowledge from a common origin before diverging into distinct civilizations? Some even speculate about links through Ice Age seafaring or propose now-lost cultures that might have served as intermediaries. These ideas remain fringe, lacking archaeological support, but they reflect how deeply the fluted point disrupts our timeline. If we knew only about the Arabian points, we might marvel at their skill and move on. But knowing they exist after the Clovis culture, and with such stylistic precision, forces a more unsettling thought. How much have we misunderstood about the flow of human innovation? For the Arabian fluted points do not appear in isolation. They exist alongside other advanced stone toolkits, blades, scrapers, drills that point to a vibrant Neolithic culture, a people who tamed the desert, followed game across the rocky plateaus and carved their lives from stone and silence. Yet we know almost nothing about them.
No settlements have been found.
No cave paintings, no burials, only these scattered tools dropped broken, left behind in the sand like punctuation marks in a story whose text has vanished. And the story remains frustratingly incomplete. Why did the technique vanish? Was it replaced by better weapons? Did the knowledge die with its last masters? Or were the fluted points symbolic, perhaps used in ritual hunts or as status markers, never meant for ordinary use? We may never know, but every time one is pulled from the ground, carefully cleaned, measured and photographed, it reminds us of how many mysteries remain beneath our feet. These are not relics of legend, but real artifacts crafted by real people whose names and beliefs and songs have been lost to time. They ask us to consider, how far did knowledge travel before we wrote it down? How many innovations were born, spread, and forgotten long before our civilizations etched themselves into stone? The Neolithic fluted points of Arabia are one of history's quiet puzzles. Small, sharp, and precise, they offer no easy answers, only questions that linger like desert wind, shifting, whispering, unresolved. And so as we continue this journey through the unknown corners of our past, we leave behind the dunes of Arabia with one more mystery in hand, and many more still buried beneath the sand. From the windswept sands of Arabia, where the mystery of the fluted points blurs the boundaries of human innovation, we now journey north back into the heart of ancient Egypt. Here, nestled along the western banks of the Nile, lies Dendera, a site of breathtaking preservation, spiritual reverence, and architectural wonder. And deep within its walls is a room that has stirred imagination for generations. The Temple of Hathor, one of the best preserved temples in all of Egypt, rises with quiet dignity. Built during the Timik period around 2,250 years ago, its columns are immense, capped with the gentle smile of the goddess of love and music. Its ceilings are adorned with vivid depictions of celestial bodies, zodiacs, suns, stars painted in shades of lapis and ochre, still faintly glowing with pigment even after millennia. But in a hidden windowless crypt beneath the temple, far from sunlight and ritual procession, an enigma waits. Etched into the stone walls are carvings that have come to be known as the Dendera lamps. At first glance, they appear curious but not extraordinary. Elongated ovals stretching horizontally, each with a thin, filament-like structure inside. A serpent emerges from within, its body coiled like an electric arc. The entire shape is supported by a pillar, and sometimes a priest or figure holds or presents it ceremonially. To many Egyptologists, these scenes are symbolic representations tied to creation myths. Perhaps the serpent as a cosmic force, the lotus or jed pillar as sacred symbols of stability and rebirth. The images are framed by standard iconography, deities, priests, hieroglyphs. Nothing in their view suggests technology, but others see something different. The shape of the object, the serpent inside, the supporting pillar, all bear an uncanny resemblance to a modern light bulb, more specifically to a Crookes tube or Geistler tube, early electrical discharge devices used in the 19th century. The shape, the coiled filament, the lack of flame all echo the appearance of experimental lighting long before Edison's famous invention. Could ancient Egypt have possessed some form of electrical illumination? Mainstream scholars reject the notion. They point out that there is no archaeological evidence of wiring, no tools or residues associated with electrical generation. Ancient texts do not describe batteries, circuits, or conductors. Moreover, the function and religious context of the crypt are consistent with symbolic and spiritual practice, not science. And yet the Dendera lamps endure as one of the most persistent and debated anomalies of ancient Egypt. Some point to the so-called Baghdad battery, clay jars with copper cylinders and iron rods discovered in Iraq as evidence that ancient peoples might have experimented with electrochemical cells. Others note that torches or oil lamps would leave soot on temple ceilings. But no such residue exists in Dendera's hidden chambers. Could the Dendera crypt have been illuminated by a technology we have overlooked or misinterpreted? Or is this simply an example of anachronistic projection where modern minds see familiar shapes in unfamiliar contexts? The serpent, after all, is a common motif in Egyptian art, often symbolizing divine energy, creation, or the god atom emerging from the primordial waters. The elongated oval might represent the womb of Nut, or the cosmic egg. The DJ'd pillar, often seen supporting the structure, is a well-known symbol of stability and resurrection. And the scenes themselves are enclosed in sacred crypts, not workshops or storage rooms. But the crypt itself is also curious. Its access is limited. Its placement is beneath the temple, away from public ceremonies. The staircases leading to it are narrow and worn. The walls are carved with precision, but the room's purpose remains obscure. Unlike open halls filled with offerings and incense, this place feels hidden, reserved, protected.
What needed to be shielded from the outside world?
Was it merely a sacred sanctuary or something more? More speculative voices point to the possibility of lost knowledge, that ancient Egyptian priests guarded sciences and technologies we no longer comprehend, that what we see as myth and symbolism may encode processes or principles once understood but deliberately veiled in religious language. Still, others take a more grounded approach, suggesting the images are allegorical, not literal. The lamp might represent the sun's journey through the underworld, the serpent a form of divine light or transformation. Ancient Egypt, after all, was a civilization of metaphor where gods and natural forces intertwined seamlessly, and so we are left with a question of interpretation. Is the Dendera lamp an example of technological pareidolia, a modern lens projecting electricity onto spiritual symbolism? Or does it hint at a forgotten chapter of innovation, now buried beneath dust and doctrine? No electrical device has been found in Dendera, no copper wiring, no conductive filaments, no supporting artifacts. And yet the image remains vivid, intriguing, unexplained. Perhaps the true mystery lies not in the stone, but in the silence that surrounds it. Why, in a temple filled with sun gods and moon cycles, would such unusual forms appear only here in a darkened crypt beneath the feet of worshippers?
What knowledge was preserved,
and what was lost? We move onward now through the winding corridors of time, where every carving, every fragment, every unanswered question may contain not only stories, but secrets. And the Dendera lamps remain, glowing not with light, but with the quiet heat of wonder. As the curious glow of the Dendera lamps fades behind us, we leave the vast deserts of Egypt and shift toward a colder, quieter mystery. One hidden not in temples or crypts, but on the wind-lashed coast of New England. Roughly 3 min off the southern coast of Massachusetts, just beyond the well-known shores of Martha's Vineyard, lies Land Island. At first glance it appears unremarkable. 600 windswept acres of rock, brush and birds battered by the Atlantic and largely forgotten by time. Today the island is uninhabited, off-limits to the public, declared a wildlife refuge. But beneath the thicket and behind the shoreline stones, a mystery lies carved in stone. Strange symbols, unfamiliar scripts, weathered lines cut into the granite surface of boulders, some nestled in the undergrowth, others lying exposed along the island's craggy shores. These are known as the inscribed rocks of No Man's Land, and no one knows for certain who carved them or why. Reports of mysterious markings on the island date back to the early 20th century, though the first systematic documentation didn't occur until the 1920s and 1930s. Even then, accounts were sparse. No Man's Land was already remote, difficult to access, and by the 1940s, the US Navy had seized the island for use as a bombing range, cutting off exploration entirely, but the stories persisted. When researchers finally gained limited access in the 1990s and early 2000s, they found something startling. On several large rocks, particularly on the island's southern and eastern coasts, were clear carvings of unknown origin. Some appeared as geometric patterns, spirals, zigzags, concentric rings. Others resembled symbols or glyphs, some reminiscent of runes, others more abstract. Most curiously, a few symbols bore a faint resemblance to Old Norse, leading some to speculate about Viking exploration along the Atlantic coast, but others disagreed,
arguing the marks were too degraded, too imprecise,
or simply not consistent with known Viking inscriptions. Could the carvings predate the Vikings altogether? There are theories, controversial and mostly speculative, that suggest prehistoric trans-oceanic contact with seafarers from Europe, Africa, or even the Mediterranean making landfall in North America long before Columbus. Could No Man's Land have been a navigational stop, a place where wayfarers marked their passage in stone? Mainstream archaeology remains cautious. There is no consensus on the date of the inscriptions. Some geologists have suggested the carvings are centuries old, weathered by wind and salt. Others believe they are more recent, perhaps created by 17th or 18th century sailors, whalers, or even early colonists. But the patterns don't align with known maritime graffiti or colonial-era markings. There's also the question of Native American presence. The Wampawag people inhabited nearby Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod for thousands of years. Could the carvings be indigenous, possibly ceremonial, a spiritual record or territorial marker? So far, no direct cultural link has been established. The symbols remain isolated. No known parallels exist in Wampawag petroglyph traditions, and the language of the carvings, if there is one, has never been deciphered. And then there's the curious fact that most of the island remains unexplored. Due to decades of military use, No Man's Land is littered with unexploded ordnance.
Visitors are forbidden.
Researchers granted special access must navigate with extreme caution. It is entirely possible that more inscriptions, perhaps even more significant ones, lie hidden in areas too dangerous to reach. What else might be waiting beneath the moss and sand? The remoteness of No Man's Land adds to its intrigue. Unlike famous sites like Oak Island or Runston Hill, the island is silent, untouched by tourism, commercialization, or excavation. Whatever is hidden there, be it ancient truth or forgotten hoax, remains untouched, cloaked by wilderness and time. Some fringe theorists have drawn connections to other North Atlantic enigmas like the Newport Tower in Rhode Island or the Kensington Runstone in Minnesota, suggesting a pattern of cryptic pre-Columbian artifacts across North America. Could the inscribed rocks of No Man's Land be part of a larger undocumented network? Or are they simply misunderstood relics, colonial graffiti mistaken for ancient code? The lack of concrete answers invites speculation, but also restraint. For every bold hypothesis, there remains the sobering fact. We don't know who carved these stones. We don't know when. We don't know what they meant or if they meant anything at all. Perhaps that is what makes them so haunting. They are not buried deep in tombs or locked in museum cases. They lie in the open, exposed to wind and tide, surviving not through preservation, but through neglect. And still they endure line by line, groove by groove, whispering a language we no longer speak. What if these stones hold a story that challenges the familiar arc of exploration and conquest? What if before colonists, before Vikings, even before recorded history, others crossed these waters, left their mark, and vanished? We may never know. But every carved spiral, every weathered glyph carved into the lonely rocks of Nom's land reminds us that history is not always written in books. Sometimes it is etched in silence, waiting for someone to notice. And so we continue forward across oceans and ages, following the faint trails left by those who came before and whose stories are still unfolding. From the carved rocks of a forgotten island off New England's coast, we now journey to the vast, sun-baked plains of southeastern Iran, where beneath the dust of centuries lie the ruins of a city both ancient and strangely ahead of its time. They call it Shah Suk, the burned city. Its name is whispered across deserts and archaeological circles alike, not because of what it became, but because of what it was and what it shouldn't have been. Situated near the Helmand River in the desolate region of Sistan, Shah Suk appears at first to be just another Bronze Age settlement. Mud brick foundations weathered by time, scattered shards of pottery glinting under the desert's sun. But beneath that surface lies a city that once defied expectations. Dating back to circa 3200 BC, this metropolis flourished in a time when most civilizations were only beginning to take form. And yet Shuk had multi-room buildings, complex water drainage systems, and what may have been one of the oldest known brain surgeries in human history. The skeletal remains of a teenage girl, discovered here, show clear evidence of trepidation. A portion of her skull carefully removed and astonishingly healed over. She survived the operation, but who conducted such a surgery, and with what tools? Even more remarkable was the discovery of a woman buried with what appeared to be a prosthetic eye, a hemispherical object made of a light material coated in gold, delicately etched with a central iris. Some researchers suggest it may have served not only cosmetic purposes, but also carried ritual or spiritual significance. And then there is the so-called world's oldest known animation, a small clay goblet painted with 5 sequential images of a goat leaping up to eat leaves from a tree. When spun, the images form a moving sequence like an ancient flip book, suggesting that someone here, over 5,000 years ago, was thinking not just in still images, but in motion. Who were these people? The ruins do not belong to the Sumerians or the Elamites or any of the major Mesopotamian civilizations we know. The builders of Shah Isuk remain anonymous. No texts, no named rulers, no written records to speak of. Only architecture, graves, tools, and artifacts remain to tell their story. And then almost as quickly as it rose, the city burned. At least 4 separate fires scorched different parts of Shahrez-Suk over the centuries. One especially destructive blaze appears to have occurred around 1800 BC, after which the city was abandoned entirely. Was this city destroyed by accident, sabotage, invasion? Or was it something internal, political collapse, environmental change, or perhaps religious transformation? No definitive answer has emerged. What is especially puzzling is that despite the city's early sophistication, there seems to be no evidence of defensive walls, palatial structures, or elaborate temples. This was not a kingdom ruled by a god-king or a militarized elite. Instead, it was seemingly egalitarian, communal, and highly specialized. Excavations have revealed industries such as weaving, metalwork, and ceramic production, as well as signs of long-distance trade reaching as far as Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and Central Asia. And yet, The site lacks monumental inscriptions, no declarations of conquest, no towering statues.
No record of who they were or where they went.
Could it be that Sher Suk represents a lost strand of civilization, a branch of humanity's story that flourished in isolation, rose with genius, and fell with barely a trace? Or might the city's abandonment have been less mysterious and more tragic, perhaps brought on by an earthquake, a drought, or a shift in river courses, turning fertile soil into lifeless dust? There are still other theories, more speculative ones, that suggest the city may have been a place of exile or even a spiritual retreat, removed intentionally from larger powers of the time. Its remote location, lack of militarism, and focus on craft and medicine all hint at something different. Some even suggest the name Burned City may not reflect a literal fate alone, but a symbolic one. Was this a center of forbidden knowledge destroyed to hide what it once understood? In the absence of written testimony, every fragment becomes a question, every artifact a clue. The evidence tells of innovation, but not its source, connection, but not its origin, and destruction, but not its cause. Today, as the sun sets over the dry Iranian plateau, casting long shadows across crumbling mud brick walls, the silence of Shari Suk is almost deafening. The wind carries no voices, only grains of sand and the rustle of mystery.
Who built this place?
What knowledge did they hold? And why did it all end in fire? The answers may lie buried just inches beneath the surface, or perhaps like the city itself, lost forever in the smoke of history.
Still we wonder, because some places don't just fade.
They leave a scar, a question that refuses to heal. And as we move onward deeper into the map of history's unsolved puzzles, Shri Suk remains smouldering, not with flame, but with the quiet heat of something we still do not understand. From the scorched silence of Shar Suk, we follow the winds westward across oceans and continents to the humid tropical coastline of northeastern Brazil. Here in the state of Paraíba, among dense forests and red earth hills, lies a puzzle that challenges the boundaries of known history. It begins with a stone, weathered, angular, covered in symbols not native to this land. According to accounts, the Paraíba stone, as it came to be called, was discovered in 1872, not far from the port town of Paraíba do Norte in what is today Pessoa. On its face, a long inscription in characters resembling Phoenician script, the ancient writing system of a seafaring people from the eastern Mediterranean whose civilization flourished between roughly 1500 and 300 BC. The text, if authentic, told a story, a remarkable one. It spoke of a ship from Sidon, one of Phoenicia's great city-states, carried far off course by storms,
of a journey beyond the Pillars of Hercules,
the Strait of Gibraltar, and across a vast unknown sea. The account ends with a dramatic claim. The mariners had reached a new land,
a distant shore, and some would remain behind, never to return. Could this inscription be evidence that Phoenicians reached the Americas over 2,000 years before Columbus?
Or was it an elaborate 19th century hoax? The initial response was one of disbelief. Scholars in Brazil dismissed the find almost immediately. The original stone vanished, its whereabouts unknown to this day. What survives is a transcription of the text written by Francisco Adulo Devenhagen, a respected historian of the era. He vouched for the find's authenticity, or at least its possibility, but others were skeptical. The absence of the physical stone, the strange timing of its discovery, and the translation's dramatic narrative all raised red flags. Critics argued that the story aligned too conveniently with contemporary romanticism, those 19th century fascinations with lost civilizations, heroic explorers, and ancient secrets. Still, some were not so quick to dismiss it. Linguists have pointed out that the script bears genuine resemblance to Phoenician forms. Its syntax, vocabulary, and phrasing, while imperfect, didn't immediately suggest a modern forgery. Some even proposed that if the inscription were fraudulent, the author would have needed rare access to Phoenician grammar guides that weren't widely available in Brazil at the time. So if not a hoax, what then? Could the Phoenicians really have crossed the Atlantic? It's not entirely impossible. The Phoenicians were exceptional sailors. Their vessels, sturdy and well-designed, pied the coasts of Africa and southern Europe. Carthaginian explorers, descendants of the Phoenicians, were said to have reached West Africa and perhaps even ventured farther. Some believe that following ocean currents like the Canary Current and North Equatorial Current, ancient ships could have drifted or intentionally sailed from the coast of Africa to the Americas. The journey would have been perilous but not unimaginable. In fact, modern reconstructions of Phoenician-style vessels have successfully crossed the Atlantic using only ancient navigation methods. And yet there's a silence in the archaeological record. No confirmed Phoenician artifacts have ever been found in Brazil or anywhere else in the Americas. No anchors, no pottery, no settlements. Could this single stone, if genuine, be the only trace left behind? There are also logistical questions.
Why would a Phoenician crew risk such a journey?
Was it accidental, as the text suggests? Or was it part of a forgotten exploratory mission, one that was never recorded in the annals of the Old World? Alternative theorists go further. Some posit transatlantic contact was more common than we realize, suppressed or dismissed by mainstream academia. Others link the inscription to broader fringe theories of lost continents, vanished empires, or prehistoric global navigation. But amid speculation, there's an absence that remains hardest to ignore: the stone itself. Without the original artifact, we are left with copies, transcriptions, and interpretations. There is no opportunity for modern dating, no analysis of tool marks, no confirmation of the stone's geology. We are left chasing shadows, lines on paper from a stone no one can find. In recent years, interest in the Paribas inscription has revived. Digital reconstructions, comparative linguistic studies, and new archaeological findings across the Atlantic world have rekindled a question long buried. What if we've underestimated the reach of ancient seafarers? Brazilian archaeologists remain cautious. Many still consider the inscription a likely hoax. Yet, a small circle of researchers continues to investigate, scouring archives, reanalyzing old maps, even conducting remote fieldwork in search of the lost stone.
'Cause what if it was real?
What if thousands of years ago, long before the rise and fall of Rome, a group of storm-tossed Phoenician sailors stood on the shores of South America, gazing into a vast, unknown world? The forested hills of Paribas whisper no answers. But the question remains, suspended between myth and archaeology, between ink and stone,
A single inscription, a vanished artifact.
and the possibility, however slim, that history is more connected, more ancient, and more astonishing than we ever imagined. Perhaps buried beneath the roots of Paribas, the truth still waits, silent, unread, unseen. And we must ask, was this message from the Phoenicians a myth created by men with imagination? Or the forgotten echo of a voyage that changed the world and left behind only one stone to prove it? As we leave behind the mysterious Phoenician script etched in a vanished Brazilian stone, our journey now returns east toward the dusty plains of Anatolia, where the legacy of empires once layered the earth like sediment. Among these ruins, resting quietly near the shores of ancient Lake Dasilitis, lies a forgotten administrative center that may hold the key to a chapter of history still veiled in shadow. This is Daskalon, a name that echoes faintly across time, half swallowed by centuries of silence. Located near modern-day Bandama in western Turkey, Daskalon was once a thriving Persian satrapal capital, an intersection of cultures in the Achaemenid Empire. Here, governors spoke the language of kings, scribes translated commands across 3 continents, and officials tracked grain, gold, and geopolitics in an age when ink was power. But what truly sets Daskalon apart are the archives, fragments of an ancient bureaucracy that seemed to vanish as quickly as they surfaced. Buried beneath layers of ash and soil, archaeologists began uncovering an astonishing trove in the early 1950s, inscribed seals, administrative tablets, and ununiform documents. Clues pointing to a once vast collection of written records. These weren't the grand myths of gods or epic poetry etched for eternity. These were the dry, deliberate notations of empire, inventories, orders, treaties, lists, and yet only fragments remain. Where did the rest of the Dascilian archives go? The known documents span a range of languages: Old Persian, Aramaic, Greek, and Phrygian, suggesting that Daskalon operated as a multilingual center of governance. But for a city of such significance, at the crossroads of imperial administration, the quantity of recovered material is perplexingly small.
Only a few dozen tablets have been found.
Each valuable, yes, but each pointing towards something much larger that has since disappeared. Was there once a library here? A full administrative complex with rows of shelves and records kept in clay and papyrus? If so, where is it now? Some researchers have proposed that the missing archives were destroyed during one of several military incursions, perhaps during Alexander the Great's campaign across Anatolia. Others believe they may still lie buried beneath unexcavated sections of the site, protected not by design, but by time's indifference. But there's a stranger theory too. Some scholars speculate that Dascalion served as more than just a provincial capital. Its archives may have functioned as a kind of intelligence center, a hub for collecting and coordinating regional information far from the heart of Proserpines. If true, the missing records may not be lost at all. They may have been removed, transported elsewhere before the city fell. If so, where were they taken and by whom? Even the few seals and tablets discovered raise unsettling questions. One bears the name of Artabazus, a satrap who rebelled against the Persian king before fleeing westward. Another suggests coordination between regions separated by hundreds of miles. Together they hint at a deeply connected and perhaps politically volatile network of power. And there is the problem of context. Some tablets appear out of place, not just in language, but in style and content, leading some to speculate that Daskalon may have inherited documents from even older centers. Could the city have absorbed archives from the Lydian, Phrygian, or even Hittite traditions before them? If so, the archive wasn't merely administrative. It was historical, a collection of knowledge from fallen civilizations, and it may have included documents that no longer exist anywhere else. As we descend into this possibility, we are left staring into a void. What if records of ancient treaties, languages, rituals, or even maps, objects that could redefine our understanding of the ancient Near East, are simply gone, erased by fire, hidden by politics, or still lying undiscovered beneath our feet? The landscape itself offers no answers. The ruins of Daskan today are quiet. Low walls, scattered stones, a dry breeze passing through once bustling courtyards. But beneath the surface lies a promise and a silence that speaks louder than absence. Why would a satrapal capital, vital enough to merit a palace and garrison, leave behind so little written memory? Is it possible that what we found is only a hint, a teaser from history, revealing enough to spark questions, but not enough to provide clarity? Perhaps that is the nature of archives, not monuments to be admired, but ghosts to be chased. And as archaeologists continue their careful excavations, each new fragment becomes part of a riddle. A chipped seal, a single word in Aramaic, a clay tag once tied to a document long since dissolved. Like puzzle pieces scattered across empires, the Dascalian archives whisper of something much larger, something once organized, controlled, recorded, and now lost. In a world that depends on records to remember itself, what happens when an archive disappears? Does the past die with it, or simply slip into another form waiting to be uncovered? The answers may still rest beneath the Anatolian soil. But for now, the mystery of Deucalion, its missing words, its vanished scribes, its silent bureaucrats, remains one of the most tantalizing chapters in the story of history's forgotten knowledge. And so we move forward, carrying with us the silence of a vanished archive and the haunting question it leaves behind. What truths about our world were once written here, and who ensured we would never read them? From the sun-baked plains of Deucalion, where ink once whispered empire and intrigue, we now descend into another kind of silence, one not made of parchment and ash, but of salt and stone. Off the coasts where tectonic plates sigh beneath shifting waters, we arrive at the cold, mysterious depths of the Taiwan Strait. Here, hidden beneath swells and currents, lie formations so geometric, so deliberate in appearance, that they have earned a reputation as the sister structures to the Yonauni Monument. We begin with the sea. The Taiwan Strait is no tranquil body of water, stretching roughly 180 kilometers between the southeastern coast of China and the island of Taiwan. It is a corridor of shifting tides, sediment-heavy currents, and secrets long buried beneath millennia of marine activity. For centuries, these waters have divided cultures, yet beneath the surface, they may also connect them through a shared enigma. In the 1990s, following the controversial discovery of the Yonauni Monument off the coast of Okinawa, divers and marine geologists turned their attention to other parts of the region. The question was simple. If a megalithic structure lies submerged off Yonauni, could similar formations exist nearby? The answer may have emerged off the coast of Taiwan. Divers reported encountering massive underwater platforms, terrace slopes, right-angled walls, and geometric protrusions at depths ranging between 25 to 40 mem. Much like the Yonauni Monument, these features seem too angular, too measured to be purely the product of erosion. Some even claim to see steps carved into vertical stone faces, long corridors leading nowhere, and blocks laid so precisely they appeared fitted by hand. But were they? Geologists remain cautious. The bedrock in the Taiwan Strait, much like that around Yonaguni, is sandstone and mudstone, sedimentary materials that can fracture along clean lines when subjected to tectonic pressure. Earthquakes, wave activity, and natural cleavage planes may all produce formations that mimic human construction, and yet the symmetry of some of these shapes defies casual dismissal. Why would natural processes create multiple aligned right angles over large surfaces? Why do some structures appear to repeat patterns at consistent intervals? And perhaps most curiously, why do local legends speak of lost lands beneath the sea? Taiwanese folklore, like that of many Pacific cultures, tells of great floods and sunken cities. Stories passed down from the Aranesian peoples describe a time when the sea swallowed entire regions and when mountains were visible where only water now lies. These myths may hold echoes of post-glacial sea level rise, an event that would have drowned coastal settlements at the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago. If these sister structures are man-made, then they would belong to a time before the sea engulfed them, a time well before the emergence of known civilizations in the region. Could they be remnants of a forgotten culture, one with architectural capabilities far beyond what we currently associate with that era?
This idea is tantalizing and deeply
controversial. Mainstream archaeology does not recognize any advanced stone-building civilization in this region. Prior to roughly 3000 BC, a submerged structure would imply either an unknown maritime culture or a lost branch of humanity's early development, both scenarios that challenge conventional timelines. And yet, the sea offers no clear answer. Exploration in the Taiwan Strait is difficult. Strong currents, poor visibility, and political sensitivities between China and Taiwan have made comprehensive study almost impossible. The sites remain largely unmapped, unexcavated, and unprotected, Without systematic underwater archaeology, the debate lingers, suspended between the probable and the possible. Some independent researchers suggest a link between Yonaguni, Taiwan, and other megalithic sites across the Pacific. They argue for the existence of a wider network, perhaps the remnants of a maritime civilization predating written history. Others warn against wishful thinking, noting how quickly erosion, biological growth, and pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns where none exist, can distort perception. Still, even the skeptics admit some formations look strangely deliberate, and in that space between certainty and doubt, the mystery deepens. Why here? Why now? The region's geological history supports the possibility that coastal settlements existed along the now submerged shelf. Sea levels rose rapidly after the Ice Age, inundating large portions of what would have been habitable land. Is it so far-fetched to imagine that people once
lived and built along these shores?
If so, could remnants of their culture remain beneath the silt? Could the stone steps and corridors be all that's left of a structure once above water, used for ritual, governance, or survival? Or are we simply projecting human intention onto the slow, silent architecture of the Earth itself? Today, the so-called sister structures of Yonaguni remain nameless, shapeless in official record. They are whispered about in dialogues, featured in fringe publications, and passed between curious minds, but they are rarely studied in detail. And perhaps that is the real mystery. Not just what lies beneath the waves, but why we have been so reluctant to look deeper. The waters of the Taiwan Strait conceal more than stone. They conceal time, memory, and the possibility that our understanding of the ancient world is still incomplete. That somewhere beneath layers of pressure and coral lies a story we have not yet dared to uncover. What did these stones witness before the ocean claimed them? Who carved them, if anyone did? And what other truths remain waiting just out of reach in the quiet, blue, dark silence of the sea? In the end, the submerged ruins of the Taiwan Strait ask us not for conclusions, but for patience, curiosity, for the willingness to consider that the world is older, more complex, and more beautifully mysterious than we often allow ourselves to believe. From the submerged echoes of ancient architecture beneath the Taiwan Strait, we now rise to the high frozen plateaus of southern Siberia, a place where silence reigns and time lingers beneath the ice. Here in the wind-swept valleys of the Alai Mountains, a discovery was made that blurred the lines between life, death, and the stories that skin can tell. The year was 1949. Soviet archaeologists excavating burial mounds, known as Koreans, unearthed something
astonishing beneath the permafrost, remarkably
preserved human remains, mummified not by intention but by the cold. The bodies belonged to the Pazaric people, an Iron Age nomadic culture that thrived in the Alai region around the 5th to 3rd centuries BC. But it wasn't just the state of preservation that captivated the world. It was the ink. Etched into the skin of these ancient individuals were intricate tattoos, mythical beasts, deer with swirling antlers, griffins in mid-leap, snarling felines, and serpentine creatures of unknown origin. The designs, still vivid after over 2,000 years, revealed a level of artistic refinement that seemed to defy the expectations of an ancient nomadic people. What did these tattoos mean? Were they marks of rank, status, or tribal identity? Or did they serve a spiritual purpose, perhaps functioning as talismans, guides for the soul in the afterlife, or records of personal mythologies? No one can say for certain. The Pazaric people left no written language. Their voices come to us only through what the earth preserved. Horse saddles, felt carpets, elaborate garments, and now skin used as a canvas for messages we still cannot fully interpret. Among the most famous of these remains is the so-called Siberian Ice Maiden, unearthed in 1993. Buried in a wooden chamber lined with grass and bark. Her body was dressed in an elaborate silk blouse and adorned with heavy jewelry. Her skin bore detailed tattoos, stylized deer, and fantastical creatures stretching along her shoulder and arm, inked in curling, dynamic lines. Even her fingers bore faint traces of symbols. For a people thought to have lived in scattered tribes along harsh mountain routes, the sophistication of these body markings suggested a deeply layered cultural world. And that's where the mystery deepens. No tattooing tools have ever been conclusively found in Pazaric burials.
How did they achieve such precision?
Some researchers speculate the use of bone or metal needles, but no direct evidence survives. The pigments, likely made from soot or crushed plants, have endured over millennia, resisting decay in ways that modern inks cannot match. Why? And what of the animals, real and imagined, that dominate their designs? Were these depictions merely decorative, or did they represent clan totems, mythological archetypes, or spiritual guardians? The deer appears again and again, often with impossibly elongated antlers curling into abstract forms. Scholars have suggested shamanistic meanings. Perhaps the tattoos were meant to channel the power of the animal, to link the human body to the spirit world. It is also possible that these tattoos mapped constellations, stories told through stars, and skin passed from one body to the next. But without texts, the interpretations remain speculative. There's another layer to this mystery: the placement of the tattoos. They are concentrated on the upper arms, shoulders, and backs, areas easily visible when garments are worn in specific ways. This suggests intention, performance, and possibly even ritual. Could it be that these tattoos were not only for the self, but for the community or even the gods? The mummies also raise another haunting question. Why were so many of them buried with such care? The tombs were not simple graves, but full ceremonial chambers. Horses were sacrificed and buried alongside their owners, their mans intricately braided, their gear richly decorated. Some bodies wore Chinese silk, indicating trade links thousands of kilometers away. It seems the Pazaric people were not isolated herders, but part of a broader and complex cultural network, and yet so much about them remains elusive. Why did this tradition of elaborate tattooing seemingly vanish? We find no later cultures in the same region practicing it with such intensity or skill. Did the knowledge die with the Pazaric, or was it deliberately forgotten? There are whispers, though not supported by hard evidence, that similar tattoo patterns appear in distant places, the Andes, Polynesia, even parts of ancient Scandinavia. Could this be coincidence? Or might there have once been a shared language of symbols that stretched across ancient migratory routes now lost to time? There is also the haunting silence surrounding their burial grounds. After the thawing of one kurgan, a local earthquake revealed another chamber, one that seemed deliberately sealed. When excavated, it contained a man tattooed from chest to wrist, his torso wrapped in furs no longer native to the region. The style of his tattoos was familiar, but the face was not. Who was he? And why had someone made such effort to preserve him in a chamber surrounded by what looked like carved totems, unlike any found in other burials? The Pazaric mummies offer no final words, only ink, only symbols, only questions. Did they walk through the world bearing their mythology on their skin? Were these tattoos personal stories, tribal legends, or cosmic maps? And perhaps most haunting of all, what stories remain buried, waiting for the ice to give them up? In the frozen earth of Siberia, the past sleeps, but only lightly. One day it may stir again, and with it more symbols etched in flesh. Until then, the Pazaric mummies remain a gallery of ancient whispers, silent yet speaking, reminding us that the human body has always been more than bone and blood. It has always been a message, one we are still trying to read. As the snow-covered steppes of Siberia fade behind us, we move south toward the windswept highlands of the Tibetan Plateau, where mountains rise like stone sentinels into the clouds, and the air is thin, quiet, and unforgiving. Along the remote borderlands between modern-day China and Tibet lies a place known as Dulan. On first approach, it appears unremarkable. a dusty plain tucked between ranges where shepherds still move with their flocks and time appears to stand still. But hidden beneath this harsh, wind-swept terrain lies a mystery that has confounded archaeologists for decades: the horse burial of Dulan. Discovered in the early 1990s during roadwork construction, the burial site is part of a larger necropolis known as the Ruway Tombs. What makes one of these tombs stand apart isn't just its scale or craftsmanship, but what lay inside. More than 200 horses arranged in deliberate, almost ceremonial positions were buried alongside a single human figure. Each horse had been carefully positioned, many of them facing outward as if guarding their fallen master. Their remains showed signs of ornamentation, bits of embroidered fabric, bronze harness fittings, decorative res. These were not wild animals, nor were they discarded war casualties. These horses were part of something greater, something ritualistic, reverent, and still not fully understood. But who was buried with them? The human remains belonged to a man of obvious status. He was interred in a wooden coffin surrounded by lacquered boxes, silk garments, iron weapons, and gold ornaments. The materials pointed to a life of immense wealth and reach. Chinese characters, Tibetan design motifs, and Central Asian craftsmanship all appeared within the grave goods, suggesting a crossroads of civilizations, a fusion of cultures in this remote corner of the world. Was this man a king? A warrior chief, a spiritual leader, and why so many horses? Historians have long known that horses played a central role in the nomadic cultures of Inner Asia. They were symbols of mobility, power, and divine favor. In many early burial traditions, horses accompanied their riders into the afterlife, ready to serve once more. But this many, 200, the scale is nearly unmatched in known burial practices of the region. What could justify such a sacrifice? Some scholars suggest the man was a high-ranking official from the Tuyuhune kingdom, a now-vanished polity that ruled this region between the 3rd and 7th centuries A. The Tuyuhun were known as fierce horsemen, masters of the Silk Road's northern trade arteries. They were both feared and respected by the great powers of their time, including the Chinese Tang dynasty and Tibetan Empire. Others point to early Tibetan burial customs, which sometimes involved animal sacrifice on a modest scale, but never to this magnitude. And yet the Dulan tomb seems to blend these traditions. The tomb's architecture echoes Chinese influence. The textiles speak of Persian and Sogdian styles. The symbology nods to early Tibetan ritual. It is as if this grave was meant not just to honor a man, but to echo an entire world. And that brings us to the heart of the mystery. Who had the power to bring so many cultures together for a single tomb? Some fringe theories suggest this was no ordinary warlord, but a spiritual figure, perhaps a lama of the Preb Buddhist Bon tradition, whose authority transcended mere political boundaries. Others propose that the man may have been a bridge between rival kingdoms, a diplomat or intermediary whose death required symbolic unity. Still others wonder whether the burial site represents something more arcane, a forgotten order, or a ritual so ancient it predates the written record. Could it be that this tomb tucked away in a forgotten valley preserves remnants of a belief system now lost to history? And then there is the enigma of the horses themselves. Genetic analysis has shown that the horses were not all from the same stock. Some were bred locally. Others seem to have originated from faraway grasslands, including what is now Mongolia.
How did they arrive here?
Were they gifts, spoils, sacred offerings transported across vast distances? And why does the burial seem to imitate military formations? Some horses flanking the tomb, others positioned in rows. Was this Arari army a symbolic retinue meant to fight for their master in the afterlife? Or is it something more celestial, an echo of an ancient belief that the stars themselves were horses galloping across the heavens? For now we can only speculate. The site remains only partially excavated. Political tensions and the remote high altitude conditions make continued exploration difficult. Some believe even grander tombs may still lie buried beneath the earth, unmarked and untouched, preserving their secrets against time. But the question lingers, what was so important about this man, this tomb and these horses, that hundreds of lives, both human and animal, were bound together in a ritual of such scale? What legacy did they hope to protect? In the stillness of Dulan's wind-swept plain, with prayer flags fluttering on distant ridges, it's easy to feel the weight of that silence, the kind that follows an ancient act too sacred to disturb. And so we are left wondering not only about who lies beneath the earth, but about the belief that drove such a burial, a belief in honor, in passage, in the power of symbols. A belief we may never fully grasp. And perhaps that is what keeps the mystery alive. The winds that move across northern Syria carry with them the dust of thousands of years, grains of time swept across desert plains, olive groves, and half-buried ruins. Just west of Aleppo, resting quietly in a region long scarred by conflict and shifting empires,
once stood a place of wonder, Yendara,
a temple of monumental stone, a sanctuary carved by unknown hands,
aligned with celestial precision.
And among its many mysteries, one detail remains especially haunting: the masked carvings. Even now, with much of the structure tragically damaged in recent years, what remains is enough to stir something primal. Imagine walking up the steps of this ancient shrine. At your feet, immense footprints, each over a meter long, etched into the stone floor. Footprints that suggest not just grandeur, but the passage of something otherworldly. Titans, gods, or mythic beasts. No inscription explains their presence. And then carved into the basalt walls, you notice them faces, but not human ones, not clearly. They appear as stylized masks, deep-set eyes, elongated features, expressions frozen in a strange ambiguity. Some are faint, weathered by time. Others are clearer, locked into the wall with an unsettling stillness. They don't seem decorative. They seem intentional, deliberate, watching. What do they mean? The Temple of Endara is estimated to have been constructed between the 10th and 8th centuries BC during the Iron Age, likely by the Arameans. It shares striking architectural parallels with Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, a comparison that has intrigued biblical scholars for decades. Both structures include similar layouts: a portico, a main hall, and an inner sanctuary. Both are aligned on sacred axes. Both feature lion and sphinx-like guardian figures carved in relief at entrances, sentinels to an inner mystery. And yet, while much has been studied about the temple's form and symmetry, little is definitively known about its purpose. Was it dedicated to Ishtar, the Mesopotamian goddess of love and war, or to Bel-Hadad, the storm god worshipped across the Levant? Or was it, as some have suggested, a sanctuary to a now lost deity, one erased from the historical record, preserved only in the stone masks that adorn its ruins? The mask motif itself is rare for the period and region. It does not resemble known Assyrian or Hittite carvings, nor does it fully align with later Greco-Roman theatrical masks. They're more abstract than that, symbolic perhaps of transformation, of ritual, of hidden identity. Were they worn by priests during ceremonies, or did they represent divine figures, gods who could never be shown in their true forms? Some researchers believe the masks might reflect an ancient form of ancestor worship, where revered figures were immortalized not as portraits but as archetypes, shrouded in anonymity, elevated beyond individuality. Others suggest the faces may symbolize the dead themselves, staring out from beyond the veil, marking. The temple is not only a house of gods but of spirit.
And yet even these explanations feel incomplete. There's a strange energy in the asymmetry of the carvings.
Some are placed in full view, others tucked in corners behind lentils hidden from casual sight, almost as though they were not meant to be seen by all, only by those who knew where to look. Is it possible the placement of the masks was part of a coded ritual language, a liturgy in stone? Could they have marked initiatory paths, levels of spiritual knowledge, or roles within a now forgotten religious hierarchy? And why masks? Across human history, masks have served a powerful role. They disguise, they protect, they invoke. From African tribal dances to Venetian rituals to Japanese no theatre, the act of masking is tied to transformation, to becoming more than oneself, or less than oneself, to becoming other. So what does it mean when a mask is carved not to be worn but to be watched? Adar offers no clear answers. No written records were found within its walls. No tablets, no scrolls, only the stone, and the silence it has held for nearly 3,000 years. In recent years, part of this silence was violently disturbed. Airstrikes during modern conflicts severely damaged the site, reducing large portions of the temple to rubble. Irreplaceable art and architecture were lost forever, and yet fragments of the masked faces remain, some cracked, some half-buried, still peering into the horizon as if nothing had changed.
What were they meant to guard?
Were they protectors of sacred space or warnings? Some fringe theorists have speculated that the footprints and masked faces together suggest contact with something not of this world, ancient giants, extraterrestrials, or interdimensional beings. These ideas capture the imagination but remain unsupported by evidence. And yet the questions persist, not because we lack facts, but because what we do have feels like only part of the story. Why would a culture place such emphasis on anonymity in the sacred? What role did performance, disguise, or concealment play in worship? What rituals were conducted behind the stone lions and beneath the masked gaze? Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Ayandara carvings is not that we don't understand them, but that they clearly meant something profound to those who carved them, something worthy of permanence, something they believed would outlast even memory. Today, the wind moves through broken columns.
Birds nest where once incense may have burned, and the eyes, those blank, impassive, masked eyes, remain. Waiting, watching, and we are left to wonder.
Not just what we've forgotten, but what we were never meant to know. As the sun rises over the ancient plains of southwestern Iran, shadows stretch across the ruins of a forgotten empire. Beneath the dust and time-worn stone of Susa and Anon lie remnants of a civilization that once stood shoulder to shoulder with Mesopotamia and Babylon. This was Elam, one of the earliest complex societies in recorded history, and at the heart of its mystery lies something far more elusive than architecture or artifact. A language, a tongue once spoken by kings and scribes, etched into stone tablets, sealed inside clay envelopes, and whispered in ceremonies beneath temple roofs. A language that lived and then vanished, the Elamite language. Unlike its neighbors, Elamite defies easy categorization. It is not Semitic like Adian. It is not Indo-European like Persian. It belongs to no known linguistic family. It is in the eyes of modern scholars an isolate, a linguistic orphan, adrift in a sea of more familiar scripts. What kind of people build a thriving civilization yet leave behind no linguistic descendants? The first known Elamite inscriptions date back to around 2600 BC, making them contemporaneous with the earliest Sumerian and Akkadian writings. Over the millennia, Elamite evolved through three distinct forms. Old Elamite used on monumental inscriptions, Middle Elamite found in temple and administrative contexts, and the later Ammerman Elamite adapted for use by the Persian Empire alongside Old Persian and Babylonian. Despite this longevity, we still struggle to fully
understand it. Some texts have been deciphered.
We know names, titles, lists of offerings, royal decrees, but the grammar, the structure, the soul of the language remains largely opaque. We are reading shadows, not sentences. One of the more intriguing puzzles is the so-called linear Elamite script. Discovered on a handful of stone tablets and brick inscriptions, this writing system remains only partially deciphered. Unlike ununiform, which was borrowed and adapted across cultures, linear Elamite appears to be a uniquely Elamite creation. Its symbols are elegant, almost abstract, and bear no obvious resemblance to other contemporary scripts. In 2022, a team of researchers made headlines claiming to have cracked parts of the code. Their method involved cross-referencing known Elamite words with royal names and patterns within the script. The announcement was met with cautious optimism, but also skepticism. The academic world has learned to be wary of premature declarations. Too many ancient languages have promised revelation and delivered only uncertainty. Why does the Elamite language resist us so persistently? Is it simply a matter of limited material, or is there something fundamentally different about how it was constructed? Some scholars have proposed that Elamite may have incorporated elements of ritual speech, language deliberately altered to obscure or elevate its meaning, understood only by the initiated. If true, this would complicate any attempt at translation. We might be decoding sacred words meant never to be plain. Others suggest a more systemic explanation, that Elamite represents a now extinct branch of a broader family that once stretched across a forgotten prehistoric landscape. If so, its sister languages have been lost, their scripts never discovered, their speakers long buried. Elamite then would be not just isolated but stranded, and yet the Elamites themselves were not obscure. Their history was marked by resilience and cultural richness. They warred with Sumer, traded with the Indus Valley, and resisted Babylonian domination for centuries. The famed Elamite king Unash-Napirisha even built Dur-Unach, a city centered around the ziggurat of Choa-Zanil,
one of the best preserved ziggurats in the world.
Within its walls were tablets, inscriptions, and offerings to gods whose names we can still read, but whose prayers we cannot hear. What were the myths of the Elamites? What labis did they sing to their children? What legal codes bound their cities? What stories did they tell of the stars, the seasons of death and creation? Today, fragments of their voice lie in museums and excavation sites. A king's decree here, a priestess's dedication there. The words are preserved, but the meaning remains elusive. There is a peculiar loneliness to a language without descendants. Latin gave rise to French, Spanish, and Italian. Ancient Greek whispers through modern science and philosophy. But Elamite, it ended abruptly. As the Achaemenid Empire rose, Elamite was increasingly sidelined in favor of Old Persian and Aramaic. By the 4th century BC, it had disappeared from the record. What happens to a culture when its language dies? Does it vanish with it? Or does it leave behind a residue, a vibration in architecture, ritual, or myth waiting to be felt if not heard? There are some who believe that clues to Elamite's origins may lie beyond language altogether, in patterns of pottery, in burial practices, in genetic traces. Others hold out hope that more inscriptions are waiting to be discovered, perhaps in untouched mounds beneath Iran's desert soil. And still others suggest that Elamite may be the last visible trace of a much older, much larger civilization, one that predates writing itself. A civilization whose language was once shared across regions, now broken into competing histories. If this is true, then Elamite is not just a mystery of its own. It is a key, a fragment of a map we no longer know how to read. As the dust settles over the ancient cities of Elilam, as scholars pore over ink and stone in search of patterns and roots, the language waits, silent, unyielding. What did the Elamites want us to know? What have we misunderstood? And what truths still lie buried in the lines we cannot yet read? Perhaps the answer is not in the words themselves, but in the silence between them.